The Brewtally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia. For over 30 years, they have been the go-to destination for all your music merch needs. From working with today's hottest bands to create truly one-of-a-kind pieces, as well as boasting a truly massive online store, Rockabilia is your one-stop shop when it comes to band merch. Use our code BREWtally at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. Huge thanks to Rockabilia for their continued support, and now, on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brewtally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is the returning Coyle of Bad Wolves and the X-Man podcast. This was a really great conversation, and I'm really excited to get it to you. But I kind of want to address some things that have happened since the last episode. I obviously took an extra week off to go see friends that were here on tour. I saw a lot of shows in the course of a week. Just wanted to spend time with friends and family and stuff like that. And honestly, as well, with the amount of stuff that was happening with the last episode with Andrew from Idola Dance Gavin Dance, and the way that thing popped off, I really wanted to give it the time that I felt like it deserved. And honestly, I know the episodes with Andrew do very well. I'm very fortunate enough to be sort of one of the very few outlets that Andrew does consistently for someone who doesn't like doing press for some reason. He enjoys doing the show. I would enjoy our friendship even if it wasn't done publicly. But it is a thing where I gotta say it was very overwhelming to keep up with that in real time as it was happening, reading all the comments and stuff like that. And it was really interesting because, and I've made no bones about it, Dance Gavin Dance is not really a band that I'm a fan of. By the time they really were kind of popping off, that wasn't really a scene that I was actively a part of. And I would say, honestly, if it wasn't for my friendship with Andrew through booking shows and booking Idola, I probably wouldn't even pay much attention to what's going on with them beyond, the headlines that get generated over the course of that band's existence with all the different singers and stuff like that. But it was interesting. I was involved, obviously, with Andrew in the process of making the clip that everyone found and shared and commented on and all that kind of stuff. And I appreciate everyone who did such. But it was interesting because I worked with Andrew and subsequently, I guess, management and label side of things to make sure it was what they wanted to be presented. And the thing that was amusing to me, I think, was people complaining about the song being in the background, which is the whole reason we all kind of worked together on this, was to help push, the new song. So having it in the background wasn't a big deal. I also wanted to take the time to thank the management and the label for giving me the rights to use that song in the YouTube clip and not throwing a copyright claim on it. More on that down the road. But it's a thing where it was just really amusing to see everyone complaining about having the song playing throughout the whole thing. And I even Googled, because that's not something I typically do, I even had Googled, how do you do that? What is an acceptable level that you typically want the song to be at? And everything I kept finding actually said that it needed to be at about 8% of the total volume. So if it's at 100, drop it all the way down to 8. And I dropped it down to 6. So I actually had it lower than what it suggested, because even though I wasn't cranking it on my home speakers on my computer, I still felt that where it suggested it be at was too loud. So it was very amusing to see everyone complaining about the audio volume of the song in the background. But that's why there was also subtitles as well. And then secondly, the funnier part was people going, I wish I could hear this without the song in the background. It literally was it exists as the episode. Like, how fucking dumb do you have to be to not realize that if that's what you were looking for, and the whole point of that clip was really to kind of be a teaser, to a long form teaser, to make you go listen to the 2-hour conversation. And it just seemed like people kind of didn't get that, or didn't want to get that. I don't really know, which brought forth a bigger talking point between Andrew and myself and a few other people, which is, that's why I don't really do those clips. Like, yes, it did really well, and it basically outperformed the episode almost 10-1. And the thing that was a little bit upsetting about that, though, was you're getting a small sample of the larger part, and people are going to probably listen to that 10, 11-minute clip and go, oh, this is what the whole episode is. And it really wasn't. And it was kind of a thing where I constantly fight with the idea of, you know, you see all these other successful shows and they have all these clips, and sometimes even it seems like almost the full interview is clipped into 10 or 5-minute segments with a link to listen to the full episode. And, you know, sometimes you'll see the full episode just isn't performing as well as the clips. And it makes me wonder. Actually, it doesn't make me wonder. It proves the proof of concept that people would rather take in small bits of information than to be challenged to listen to something in a long form. And I always feel like that dilutes the purpose of a long form. If all you're going to do is a 5-minute bit, then why not just ask a 10-minute, like do a 10-minute podcast? If that's all anyone wants. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe no one wants an hour-long podcast or however long the conversation goes. But for me, I feel like that's the problem. We've gone away from the long form. That's why I enjoy the medium. So I don't know. It was a really interesting, eye-opening thing. Another thing I've kind of been thinking about is gratitude. And I said the other day, if you follow me on the socials, that it would correlate to this episode with Doc. And part of that is, so much of this past week, going to shows and stuff like that has been just one of gratitude. You know, I'm grateful, and I have such amazing friends that I've made from doing this. You know, someone like Andrew, someone like Doc. Even in doing this episode, I hit up Doc personally, and I was like, hey, would you have time before you go on tour to do, you know, come back on the show? You know, you have a new couple singles that have come out, and you have a tour coming up, like all this kind of stuff seems like a great opportunity to just catch up and bullshit. And, you know, verbatim, he was like, for you, yeah, I'll make time. And it was a thing where Doc doesn't have to do that. Doc is a very busy person on his own accord, like doing all of the band shit he does, plus his own podcast. He doesn't have to make time for me. But I'm very appreciative that he does. I'm very appreciative that anyone makes time for me. I'm very appreciative that anyone spends time listening to this show. And it's a thing where going to the Better Lovers show and running into Jordan and, you know, talking with him for a little bit and hanging out after the show and kind of building this infancy of a relationship. I would call it a friendship, but I feel like a friendship means something a little bit more than maybe where we're at. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I've been thinking about it, but it's still a thing to me where I was appreciative of his time, and the time that we have spent, texting and so forth, since our chat, and getting to know each other a little more. And it's kind of weird because this is someone I've looked up to for a very long time. Every Time I Die being one of my favorite bands, for decades at this point, and Doc being one of my favorite people. You know, I listen to his show, and I kind of hold him in such a high regard for being well thought out and spoken with his ideas. You know, in addition to how he navigates his own life and hangups and kind of does it in a public platform. So gratitude has been something that's just been really omnipresent the last week or so. Even extending into going to see my friend Frankie, who is out with Amir right now, and Alpha Wolf, and, you know, having dinner with him and my wife the day before their show here on an off date, and just thinking, I mean, at one point talking about a memory that my wife had with when we first met Frank, and it was really funny to him be like, holy shit, we've known each other that long. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it's been like almost the full tenure of my relationship with my wife. Like, we've known each other now probably going on 14 years. And it's just wild to think about that and think about all the things that like Frank has done for myself and for my wife, like the generosity of what he's extended when he's on tour. And, I'll even take it a step further and going to the show like the next day. I had some dude as I was walking to the box office with my wife just pointed at me, goes, "Love the podcast, man." Had that a handful of times this weekend. And I'm really bad with compliments. So if you happen to see me out and about and you say that, or you start talking to me about the show and I maybe seem disinterested or weird, it's not that I don't want to be talking to you. It's more that it makes me feel weird because I just don't feel like it's a thing that requires any extra effort. I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I've talked about how I'm not good at it, and I went to therapy to kind of address it, and I guess it sort of stems from imposter syndrome to a degree. Literally as I'm doing this, I'm awkwardly fidgeting with something because it makes me feel awkward to admit this. I think we all go through this, though. I think we all have these bouts of not feeling accepted or not feeling worthy of the love or adoration that we get from others, peers, or whatever. But it's something that we should feel good about. I know I can probably speak for any of the people I've mentioned in this, opening part of the episode, that we all work really hard at what we do. We spend lots of time sacrificing time we could be spent doing other things to do this thing that we love, that it's a creative outlet for us in some way, shape, or form. And then we get something out of it from those that, enjoy the thing we do. And we shouldn't feel weird or awkward or bad about it, but I think it just takes time getting used to it, because I think we're all kind of conditioned to ride this line of not wanting to feel like your shit don't stink. Like, yeah, man, I'm real fucking good. Yeah, man, I know I'm good. I know I'm cool. Like, I don't I don't ever want to feel that way. And I feel like accepting compliments or any of that kind of stuff it just inches you closer to that line, to where maybe you lose a little bit of yourself along the way. So all that said, let's get into my conversation with Doc. It's a long one. It's a good one. And I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Sort of amusing, the other day, I introduced a couple of friends together, and they were like, "Oh, I think I've seen you around, da 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 da," and I was like, "Oh, another thing you guys have in common, you're part of the Dead Dad Club," and they were like, "Oh, when did yours die?" Or how, it was kind of funny, and like my wife and some friends were like, "What the fuck? That's not really a thing you say." And I go, I've learned actually that like it's not trauma bonding necessarily, but almost like this thing where after a while, like it is sort of a thing where you just kind of learn to understand like it is a bonding experience. And it's a way kind of to like start a new rapport with someone that maybe you don't know. And I go very much like in the same way, like today, dropping my dog off, like we were all talking about like my dad just had open heart surgery a couple of weeks ago. And so they were like, "How's he doing?" And I was like, "Fine." We had my mom and I got to have that like serious conversation where I was like, "Yeah, if he doesn't make it or whatever, like these are some things that I would like if you don't want them." And then kind of talking about like inevitably when they do pass, like these are the things that I would like to keep. And then the rest I'm probably just going to get rid of because I have no need for it. And they were like, "Oh, well, isn't it kind of weird how like you start thinking about like these kind of things as you get older, like the mortality and things and possessions and how they don't really mean anything. And you would rather have the person versus the thing." And I was like, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with like a lot of things in life. Like they're just things. I don't need them. If it really boiled down to it, but certain things obviously hold a more sentimental value of the person than other things.
Sure. Yeah, I guess my view on it is it just it's a thing where like I'll meet people who are older than me, and they'll talk about their parents. Like, "Oh, I'm going to see my parents." I'm like, "Oh, you had those." Like it's like, "Oh yeah, I thought, yeah, oh yeah, that's the thing."
Well, I mean, like, because I feel like this is kind of a weird thing at times. Like when people ask me, Like, oh, how often do you go see your parents? I'm like, maybe once a year. Like, I was thinking the other day, other than when I went and saw my mom at my dad's surgery thing, that I was like, I think the last time I saw you guys was like, well, actually, it was Thanksgiving, but I think the year before that, it had at least been like a year and a half, and they only live an hour away. I find it weird when people are like, I see my parents and my family all the time, and I'm like, what's that like?
No, when I lived in Jersey, I saw my dad once a week.
Did you?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's so weird. I think it's interesting how like people grow up in their familial relationships, and as you get older, like I always talk about like moving away, and that was sort of the point I was going to make was how hard of a transition was it for you to move farther away? But I guess with you touring, you probably always kind of experienced being a long distance away for a long time, away from friends and
No,
family.
no, it hit me really hard. I didn't kind of, just yeah, that distance was when I finally got to LA, and it was a adventure getting here because my car broke down. So it was something that was supposed to take about a
I
week. It
remember
took me
that.
about 3.5 weeks. Um, when I finally got to Los Angeles, I got my room and I saw my stuff in there, and I was just like, it was emotionally, it was a thing. It took me, probably 3, 4, 5 months to really accept it, and just because it's a invisible security blanket, that you don't realize by that proximity, and it's a real kind of, I think, it's a very different kind of lifestyle. The kind of people who decide to separate from their kind of immediate familial connections and the transplants, like that's a certain personality type. And most people are not like that. Most people stay pretty much within their locale. Um, and, because it takes a lot. That's the roots, all the, all that stuff, and I had a pretty big family, but my family started spreading out anyway. Like people started moving here, started going here, so it's funny enough. I had a handful of family members move out to Los Angeles. So I actually had some connections out here, which was actually really, really nice.
Do you ever do you ever envision yourself moving back home?
No,
No.
unless, I mean, it's New Jersey is so, like, they have very picturesque uh, suburban areas
Hmm.
that are like, I mean, just completely quiet and serene. And I think it's probably, really great place if you're well off enough and you can live in a great area to like raise a family. It has that, it's very amenable to that. But I don't know, once I hit like age 28, 29, 30, I started spending more time in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and then moved to Los Angeles. I just enjoy kind of faster paced urban lifestyles, just more amenable to like my personality than kind of just being in like the quiet burbs and not having no action, I don't know. maybe at some point I'll end up there, but right, for up to this point, it hasn't really been my cup of tea, but I can see it.
It's always interesting because like I've really been thinking a lot about, and what makes me bring this up is obviously being from the East Coast myself, but having lived here in Michigan way longer than I ever lived back home, the idea of home is an interesting one when you think about it, because the only time I go back home where I'm from originally is for funerals and stuff. And I had this epiphany at my uncle's funeral where I was like, short of my grandparents, once they're gone, I have no real familial ties to this place anymore. No reason to come back. And but I still always in like my heart of hearts, I still identify as like an East Coaster, and I still feel like the East Coast is where I'm from. It's where I'll always be from, even though like I said, I've lived here. I became an adult here. I went through most of my growing experiences here in the Midwest and in Michigan. So I always wonder, for those people who, especially coming from out east, going out west or somewhere different, like just how do you identify with that? Like how, like, do you still feel like it's home, or do you feel like maybe you've outgrown it even?
No, I feel very comfortable when I go back to Jersey, and there's an energy to it and a simplicity, I think, to the
Hmm.
way people connect to each other. I think there's a kind of stereotype about the Northeast that people are rude. Um, and that's not my experience at all. I think people are extremely communal and helpful, um, and polite, and especially the areas I've grown up around. It's always good vibes, and of course there's I kind of when I started like moving closer to New York, I think when you get to like close to New York and in North Jersey, where the kind
Mm.
of pace of things picks up and it's a little more rough, I think you get a little bit more of that kind of more New York. It's just a little grimier. It's a little. I think there's a people in that area. It's like it's very expensive to live, and people work really hard, and they're like dealing with the elements and they're dealing with public transportation, and I think that has a way of kind of weighing on you, and so that gets manifests itself in kind of certain aggressive personalities, but it's also like very endearing. It's a like
Yeah.
uh, ball busting culture, kind of like it's just like roll with the punches. This is what it is. We go out, we shovel snow, we deal with the subway, and but it can come off as very like bitter, I think
Yeah.
sometimes. And I totally get that. And that was a juxtaposition, I think, to Los Angeles, which was, when I moved to LA, it was 10 years ago, and I think the cost of living was a lot better, even just 10 years ago. So I think you could work not quite as hard and have a lot more. Just basics, just the fact that it's sunny outside, you can go for a hike, and there's a lot of things you could do that were uplifting to your spirit that didn't cost any money. Um, and it's also, I think LA, it's a place of opportunity. So you had a certain kind of like hopeful energy, depending on what social circle you kind of fell into. That also really connected with me. But I feel like I've like almost a certain West Coast optimism and sunny side to my personality that blends in really well here. But also, I think luckily was fortified by the just the grind that the East Coast is. Like
Mm.
you have to really put it in, and so you come out here, you feel like you're a little tougher than some of maybe some other people that aren't used to like really going for it, and that's an advantage. Everyone I know from the East Coast that comes to LA does really well.
It's funny because my one time going out, excuse me, going out there, and like I said, it's so weird because I feel like you kind of alluded to it, where it's like people from the East Coast, I feel like have this vibe about us, like where it's like we kind of, I feel like, move and talk at a much faster pace than a lot of other people. Um, I mean, even to the point where, like, living here, like I said, as long as I have, like, people are still kind of like, you're not from here, but where are you from? And a lot of people actually think I'm from somewhere out west. And I'm like, I'm actually from out east. But I found that when I was out in LA, that it's just like everything moves so slow out there. It felt like to me, like, where it's like no one wakes up early, no one's grinding early, they stay out late, and everyone's just kind of very lackadaisical. Where I'm just like, oh man, y'all got to start fucking doing some shit. Like,
I think it
and
depends
it
who you
kind of
talk to,
weirded
but
me out. I was gonna say it kind of weirded me out too, though. Like I remember, I forget what the fucking place was called, but it was like a fucking spot that had outdoor seating. So it was a pizza place, and we like out in WeHo, and we ended up. I just went to bring the shit in to throw it away because I'm like, well, no one was serving us or anything because it was all kind of self serve at the counter. And then this dude's like, "What's wrong?" And I go, "What do you mean what's wrong?" And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Taking care of my stuff." Like I'm not just gonna leave it. And then he was like, "Well, someone was gonna do that. Like, did someone not come and help you? Was someone not serving you?" And I was like, "No, it's fine. We were outside. Like, it's not a big deal." And they were just like getting agitated and mad at me for bussing and cleaning up my own shit. And I'm like, "Isn't that what you're supposed to do?" But it was just weird that like that kind of same thing just kept happening almost everywhere I went, where someone was like almost mad that I was trying to do something for myself or like just taking care of something on my own because I didn't see the need in having someone else do it for me.
interesting. Well, it has been
Very
my
weird. Like I
experience,
don't know, just
but
a weird thing. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you pick up different things when you travel and notice like weird, odd things and how people interact and with their surroundings and so forth.
Yeah, and listen, I think it's tough to like people will often ask me, because I tour a lot. Oh, you were in this city, you were in this country. What do you think about that? And I'm like, I think you're in a place for a day, you're in a place for a couple of days. You're getting a very small snapshot of understanding what that place is, and it probably takes being in a place for a long time. And even like LA, there's every area is different, and there's a vibe over here. There's stuff going on here, and just absorbing what all that means. I think it's going to take some time. So but it's all vibes at the end of the day. Like you either connect with a certain area or not. You know.
I mean, I think will be as a good of a segue to talk about this thing that I kind of was interested in discussing. But obviously, on your show, you've talked quite a bit about your experience while it was happening and subsequently afterward with Pat and Ricky on your show, your time in Ice Nine. To me, I feel like because I've seen that band kind of, like on the Atreyu tour when I saw them and they were the second of four, and then seeing them from that with the silver screen coming out and doing what it did and just seeing that band grow and grow and grow and reinvest and all this kind of other stuff, but seeing how grueling that touring schedule is and just seeing them like never being home and so forth. Obviously, I'm sure you knew that the tour that you were going to, or the touring you would be doing with them was going to be kind of intensive and for a long duration, but like, could you mentally even prepare for like what it was going to be once you got into it?
Um, I mean, I think once you're out, you're kind of out. It's I get pretty. It's a little difficult for me because I'm like still doing Bad Wolf stuff, and so I have that on my mind. And I would literally on the second tour, I'd be like flying out, or I like drove and then flew to like do a music video, and there was another project I was working on right in the middle of it. So I never felt like I could just focus on that. There's always like
Mm.
other things go. There's a million things always going on in the background. So it's like to me, it's pretty easy to be honest. Like in terms of just being out, especially with the band like that, because you're rolling pretty comfortable. Um, you're in a bus. You're not lifting gear. You have a good amount of your own spare time. They're rolling in a very professional manner. There's good food and accommodations and things like that. So I don't think the physical touring part of it really takes too much out of you. Um, but I just had other projects that were really taking up a lot of my time. Um, and that was disallowing me from just doing that, and that was pretty stressful. And then essentially between every tour, we'd have to learn 3 or 4 new songs. So it was more just like, all right, this tour just ended, and now you have to like you're home for a couple days, and you have to like so even your time at home, you can't really rest. You're like work, you have to go right back to work. So that was really like the tough part of just like even when you had a few days, you're not really relaxing. It's like it's even and their songs are difficult and there's a lot going on, and so you have to put a lot of time in, and that's just how I work anyway. So it was just like really making sure I was prepared for whatever I needed to work on in between, and so that was really the tough thing. And then it was really like that ended, and then I was supposed to go out with Bad Wolves with Asking Alexandria, and that didn't end up happening because we ended up canceling the tour. But then immediately we had to go into promoting the new Bad Wolves album, which was coming out, 2.5 months after that. So I just, and that stuff, even though I was home, it's like, that's like a full-time job when you're trying to promote a record and do promo and just all the stuff that goes into that. So it was right from that right into the, God forbid a week, then Bad Wolves for 6 weeks. So it's really like the collective of it all. As opposed to just like, because the Ice Nine thing was intense. But it's more like that was just a piece of it. Really looking at it as a
Right.
whole was really daunting, and it also just takes a real big toll on your like personal relationships. And with I just gotten engaged, and that really was difficult. You know,
You're somebody that like from social media perspective, because I mean, we only see what you're willing to show us, but it seems like between everything you do, like it feels like it'd be very overwhelming, like that you don't have much personal time ever, like that you're always doing something, have a bunch of irons in the fire at all times. So I always kind of, and I'm sure we probably have talked about this before, either on this or personally, but it's a thing where I'm always just like fascinated with like how do you compartmentalize your life to where it's like, because it seems like it's work, 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 and it doesn't seem like you ever have time or take time for yourself to just do something.
I mean, I guess it's like I really feel like what happened was like from the second Bad Wolf split with our ex singer, it's been like emergency mode in like my career because it's like immediately went from all right, we got to find a singer. So that's like however many months we took to do a singer search, and then it was like now we have to finish the record, and then however long it takes to do the record, and then we need then we started touring in 2022, and then like our guitar player quits, and then it's just the whole process of going, how do you keep this thing afloat, and then not to mention all the kind of the harassment and the crazy like terrible like mental stuff you had to deal with. But it's just been this like, all right, how we're trying to keep this thing afloat. We're trying to we toured, we did 3 tours that year, but they were all like pretty big tours. We went out with Papa Roach a couple times, Fall in Reverse, Volbeat, all like pretty major tours. And then right into 2023, I was like, all right, we got some time. And I was, a big reason why I took off that, was able to do Ice Nine Kills tour, was I was told that we were going to, we weren't going to put a record out in 2023. The hell is going on? Got someone, you hear that? Yeah, so, that is wild. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. What was that?
It just sounded like someone had like some Spanish music bumping outside. So I can't see anybody. But anyway, in 2023, I thought Bad Wolves was like going to take a break, basically.
Would make sense.
And we had the beginning of the year, we were finishing the record in January and February that year. So I was working on that, and I was kind of like, it was just burnt out, and kind of was like, okay, we're gonna put the record out next year, and kind of just take our time and kind of I was like kind of figure some things out, and then all that stuff with Ice Nine got thrown into me, and it went from this is gonna be a chill year to like the most insane year. And again, at that time, it was literally 5 tours basically all in a row, so it was like just going like, this is crazy, but you kind of have to do it. And then so it's just been like, I think I go into like obsession mode, like I have to win, I have to make this work, I have to do it. And so it's it's helpful in that I think I've made a lot of progress in my career, and I've really allowed things, or gotten things to the place where it's respectable, where it's like, all right, we're out here, we're doing the thing, cool things are happening, but it's a tough spot to be in because you're like always feeling like if I'm not pushing it, that things could fall apart in any minute, so there's like almost an anxiety around letting your foot off the gas, but yeah, so it's made, I think it has made me like, I feel more distant. And because like I said, that pretty much from 2021, beginning of 2021 to like now has been like pretty breakneck in terms of just the intensity of my approach, you know. And again, a lot, you know, I've had done some of the biggest things I've ever done in the last couple of years. Um, but I think it does take its toll on you, especially in just your connections, your how you're connecting to your friends, how you're connecting to your family, how it affects your relationship. I think all that stuff has been kind of a mixed bag, but it's like I don't know any other way to approach it because I feel like if I stop, then I'm gonna have, you know, I might not have a career, and I'll be back to bartending and whatever, you know.
Well, I was almost going to say, and kind of wondering if because of that downtime between, God forbid, to everything of you moving out to LA and everything, if you maybe, like, if that's why you maybe take on as much as you do, because you're like, it's feast or famine, man. Like, and I knew what the lean times were like, so I kind of need to take advantage of every opportunity while I have the opportunities before they don't come my way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's basically I think the God forbid experience taught me uh, you can get these opportunities and good things can happen, but it can also end, and it can also not be what you think it should be, right? Like people have this idea that, oh, I'm going to get in a band and we're going to be successful, and then that's going to be my job. But the truth is, most artists do a multitude of things that they can't really just make a living from that one band. And so whether they're like producing albums or they have multiple bands or they, you know, have a side business or they have just a job at home that allows them to kind of come in and out. Um, and I kind of was resigned before Bad Wolves to like do music as a side thing. And then it kind of came back into my life unintentionally as a full-time thing. And so in a weird way, it kind of like, not saying it made me stuck, but it's like a gift and a curse, right? Because you want to be in a situation where you go, hey man, I'm doing this and this is really cool. But it's also when you're like a touring person, it puts you out of contention for a lot of other type of work because you're gone all the time. So there's a lot of
Right.
regular jobs that just aren't going to work with what you're doing or other professions. So it's like kind of either you're all in on that lifestyle or you're not, you know. And so you have to go, okay, well, how far can I take this? What is the level of how I want to kind of approach it? So it can be daunting, you know, and especially when you're in a situation where, you know, I think with a lot of what people don't realize about a lot of artists is uh, you're on this cusp of like where you might be in a successful act overall, but even that success isn't enough for everyone to live comfortably really well. So you kind of like you reach a point where you're gonna go, either we're doing this full time or we're not. Even though you might be successful, and you've seen this with like, you know, bands like Periphery, for example, who was a pretty like busy touring band, and then since the pandemic they've done just like a handful of things because that works
Yeah.
better for their lifestyle because they're able to make a living from doing other things outside the band or connected to the band. And then they can kind of approach the band in the way that makes sense for them. But it doesn't mean they couldn't do it full time, but they probably couldn't do it to the level that would make their lives as comfortable as they would like to, or that they would be comfortable with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think what gets interesting, and I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but it's interesting having some of these kind of conversations with people that are, roughly our age. I think you're a couple years older than me, and I'm about to turn 40 in like a couple months. But it's interesting hearing some people, and more specifically, a person said this to me once, where they're like, at the level that this band is at, if I can do it for X amount of more years, I can retire off of that money and live a really fucking good life based on where I live, the fact that I've, owned my house for a while, da 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 da. And it was really interesting to kind of hear this person talking about an exit strategy, arguably, while they're just kind of starting to hit that, like, we're headlining these kind of rooms, we're, pretty big build on festivals and so forth. And it just was a thing where it's like, that's not the kind of conversation you usually hear someone saying that's at that point in their career. It's usually, man, we're just going to ride this until we can't. And it's like, no, I'm looking at doing this for like 5 more years and then I think I'm done. And it's like, wow, okay, like that's not a typical thing. But I wonder if, given the nature of just the touring industry, and especially after, pre and post pandemic, during, I guess, I wonder if people are just kind of being a lot more smarter about looking at, I'm going to come in, I'm going to try to make as much money as I can in X amount of time, because either it's just not worth all the time I'm going to be away from friends, family, whatever. The touring industry may not last that long with, everyone kind of like buses and stuff like that not being readily available for everybody. So, and touring internationally becoming a lot more harder to do where you're still making ends meet by doing it. So it just was kind of interesting to hear someone say that, and I'm wondering now if like more people are kind of thinking that way, where it's like, I think reasonably I can hit it this hard for about 3 to 4 years without burnout, and then I'm getting the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how pervasive that is. The truth is, there's only really the bands at the top are really making money like that they can like, oh, I can retire in 5 years. That's such a small percentage of bands. Most bands are living hand to mouth and just like getting by if you're lucky. And half the bands are literally like they break even on tour. They're not even really making money. They make money in other areas, and the touring is just kind of a means to an end. And yeah, things have gotten a lot more expensive, which means even less bands are making money on tour. So I think that's the rarity. And the people, people I'm friends with in bands that are very successful, whether it's guys in Machine Head or Metallica or In Flames, they're never going to stop. They love it. That's what they do, like, so I don't, I think most people that if they love doing that, they're going to do it as long as they can. I haven't really heard too many people say that. The only, time I think it's more prevalent, I think, when people have children and they go, I want to be home for my kids. And I've heard that sentiment, but not really people just, because I think if someone says that, then they don't really like it. They maybe they just look at it as a business thing, like a startup. I'm like, oh, I'm going to build my startup and then I'm going to cash out. And it's maybe a more kind of a cold business decision, maybe.
I'll say that that's part of the reason this person said that. It was a lot of just bullshit of the music industry and things that you deal with, where you're just like, oh, okay. Like it's always funny because like sometimes I want to get like into some of the shit on these things where I'm like, because I do think that it would be really interesting and I think better for people to be a lot more forthcoming and honest about the experiences they're going through. Doing this thing that this podcast kind of shines a light on, which is hard rock and heavy metal and so forth. But I also understand that I think if you did that, it would kind of Wizard of Oz it a little bit, where people are like, oh, I don't really fuck with this anymore. Like I thought I wanted to, because like the sexiness and the allure of sort of whatever rock star ideals there still are about the touring industry and so forth. I think we're slowly all understanding that it's being pulled away, and people are like, this shit kind of sucks. The only part that's fun is the time on stage, is basically the camaraderie you have with the people you're touring with. But outside of that, a lot of it sucks, and a lot of it's little to no money. It's also people pulling you in different directions, starting internal fighting because someone thinks maybe you're the star of the band and can go on your own, and all these other things. So it's like you start learning a lot of these things and having these conversations with people, you're just like, why does anyone want to do this? Because it sounds awful at times.
Well, I'll say this. What is there some industries out there that are just cupcake, no problems? I'm like,
Yeah,
what
the movie industry.
The music movie, well, come on. I mean, I'm sure you're joking, but like
wrestling took a big hit too.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're like, working construction, that's a fucking hard job. That's annoying. That's whoops your ass. I think every profession is tough. There's and with this, no one's forcing anyone to do anything. Like,
it's true.
You spend your time doing this, and you don't, I think the entertainment industry, I remember anything that involves the arts involves an activity that most people do for free, that some people get paid for, right? So anything that's like that, like people write novels on their own, and they would, Shakespeare in the Park or whatever, like, people are creating music. Most people that are doing that are not being paid to do it. They're doing it because they enjoy doing it, and they, and so when you move when you professionalize any of that, those areas are ripe for exploitation. You know, and you know, navigating that, figuring that out so that it works for you, you know, do your best to do that. But I think when you're a touring artist, right, when that's like your main way you make money, dude, it's just a lot of sweat labor. That's you are gone, you are out. It is an investment, uh, and that's not for everybody. You know, it's not like a some passive income business that you can just set up and money is rolling in. Like you are physically, it is a blue collar. You are physically doing the thing. You are there. And when you're doing that, you can't be doing anything else. You can't, oh, my kid's prom was last week. Well, you ain't going to be there. You're going to be in Belgium, you know? And that is a very particular way to live. And it's not for everybody. And if you kind of like, you get into this and you realize like, okay, I'm going to be doing this for like ever. That's what it is, right? If you're actually like really the top dog, you're really successful. What is Kiss doing? What is AC/DC doing? What is Guns N' Roses? They're playing shows. They're rocking, right? That's what it is. So either you're into that or you're not. You know. So the idea is, you know, if it doesn't work for you, I get it. I don't think it's for everyone. You know, and if you're successful enough where you can make it really comfortable for yourself, great, go for it. But I don't abide by the complaining. I'm just like, then just don't do something else. Don't tell me how tough it is. It's like, I get it. If you don't like it, then leave.
I mean, it's funny because like I think doing this, like I talk with a handful of people, you know, like today, like I wasn't planning on going to Atlanta this weekend, so I'm like, not that I was stressing to get it done ahead of time, but I was like already working on getting this week's episode done and ready to go. And I'm already starting to work on like shit. I texted you last night. I already got your graphic for this episode, which won't be out for a couple of weeks anyway. But I was trying to get as much shit done as I could while I'm just sitting there working on other facets. But it's like sometimes I'll be like, I got to get this thing done. But I want to get it done. I enjoy doing this. But it's a thing where it's like, I mean, I don't make money doing this. Like, this is a thing I do because I love doing it. But it's funny to see the relationship at times where I'm just like I feel bad like when I'm like I'm sick. Like I was sick a couple weeks ago and I was like I can't even do the intro outro. Like my voice is so fucked up I can't do it. So I just was like it's the best of. Here, listen to this episode that I did last week or another episode or whatever, I don't care. But it's weird that it's like I feel some sort of obligation to people that I've never met for the most part and I don't talk to, but they're essentially I treat them almost like, you know, customers where I'm like I have to give you this thing that you expect every week. And then it was fucked up because as I was thinking that while I was sick, I ran into a dude at the Breaking Ben show, and he was like, "What's the episode this week?" I was like, "Oh, it's gonna be this." And he was like, "Oh, when's this episode coming out?" And I was like, "Oh, not for a couple of weeks." And he's like, "Oh, that's how I start my Sundays." I was like, "Really? That's how you start your Sunday?" And he goes, "Yeah, turn it on, and I kind of get my day going, do like laundry and some other shit." And I'm like, "Huh, that's weird." I don't know. It's the first time anyone's ever been like, it's how I start my day. It's how like I kind of get ready for the week. And it's like you do this thing or we do this thing and you just kind of don't necessarily hear those things or how it impacts someone's day to day or whatever. But it is kind of like what keeps you going in this kind of thankless thing where it's like I'm sure very much like I do, you stare at your posters on your wall doing the intro and outros and stuff. And you're just like, is anyone even fucking listening to this thing? Like I'm just sitting in my room and it feels very like pump up the volume at times where you're like, I don't know if anyone's fucking listening, man, but da-da-da-da-da. And then, you know, you find out people actually do give a shit. And it's just, that's the thing that kind of keeps you going at times where you're like, it's a thankless job. It doesn't pay, but it's the why and it's the want to do it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's totally internal. I think there's the kind of like creation element of anything. But then once you put it out there, in the world, right, you're kind of there's inherent risk, you know, risk of being rejected, risk of being told you're not good enough, and the worst risk of all, which is risk of no one caring, no one consuming what you're putting out there. But at the end of the day, it's like if you were to look at the numbers of like or the likelihood that it'll be quote unquote successful. Most of our odds aren't very good, so it has to be about something other than that, you know. And so whatever compels you, if that's what you're compelled to do, if that's what there's whatever motivating force, I think, for me, it's always been about doing things that like connect or doing things that I feel like are high quality. Like, oh, this has a value because it's for me, I started my podcast and it was about creating almost like a historical record of like what I've been through, what my band went through, what the scene I was a part of, how that, developed, and I started early enough where not no one, but very few people were doing what I was doing in the world I was doing it. In the way I was doing it, it was very personal to me. Many people have done my show. It's the first podcast they've ever done, and that makes me proud that I can kind of create some kind of like record of some of these situations and catalog just the history. And that was important to me. But all that has to be, I don't care what it is, making a band, making podcasts, a YouTube, whatever you're doing, like you got to figure out if it's worth it to you, and it can't all, sometimes it is about external validation, right? No one wants to be that tree in the forest with no one there to hear it.
Yeah. I have a couple questions for you speaking to podcasting things. First one, I'll kind of, because the other one's kind of I don't want to say it's a clickbaity type thing, no pun intended, but it's something I've noticed in listening to your show, and I wonder if you have as well. But the first thing I'll ask is, because of the rigorous touring schedule you had since kind of starting it, where you do these like stop-start things because of your touring schedule, has there been a point where you thought about just, I don't have the time to dedicate to this like I really want to, so I'm just not going to do it anymore? Like, has there been a possibility of the show not existing anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few times. And, might be something like that in the future coming up. But we'll see. It's been more for me like when the intensity really built up last year, where or even I guess even before last year, I guess the last 2 years, so 2022, 2023, where like I was so busy, like, because I started doing the God Forbid reunion stuff too. So I'd be on a Bad Wolves tour on my days off planning a God Forbid thing. And like, just feeling like all your time is dedicated. But whereas when I started with Bad Wolves, I wasn't dealing with the band business. I was just really just playing in the band. So my time I had a lot more free time to kind of work on what I wanted to. And in those early days, the podcast was so important because I started the podcast right around the same time I started playing with the band, but the band wasn't a really, really big thing until, a couple years later. For me, it's like I put a lot of time into it in terms of when I'm home, because I almost have to work twice as hard at home to create enough episodes. So when I leave, I have enough interviews to kind of get me through that time, always to differing degrees of success. And I feel like I haven't really focused as much on writing music the last couple of years, because when I'm home, I'm doing a lot of podcast work. And a lot of times I have another show that's not out yet, Not Fest. It's coming out pretty soon. So I'm like doing that once a week. And then like a couple of years ago, I was doing that show Last Words. I was doing that show. And so I've always had like a lot of stuff going on in kind of the media spaces and doing a lot of stuff like this, where I'm doing my show, but I'm also doing a lot of other people's shows. And after a while you look around and you go, am I a musician or am I a media figure? And so, and the other thing is like, I never really got the visual component of the show up, and like and there's been some disagreements between me and my podcast network about getting on YouTube, and I feel like I kind of missed the boat on YouTube, and I think that's kind of hurt the growth of my show, and it's evolved. The podcast space in the heavy music world has evolved, and even though you're an early adopter, that doesn't really matter if the game changes and it gets more complex and it advances, and so and also kind of tracking my own personal interests in wanting to kind of pursue the same because my show has a structure to it. It has a theme.
Right.
And so that can kind of, having that similar conversation or doing that same arc, can kind of have diminishing returns after a while. So I'm not going to say anything official now, but there's a good chance I at least put a pin in it at some point.
It almost sounds like you're sort of doing like what I am and was sort of doing, because it's like funny enough, I've been talking about the show I was doing with Corey and Jackie, the Green Room. They were like, we should do a weekly show. And I was like, I'm never doing a weekly show ever again. It's always going to be seasonal. It's always going to be just, we record X amount of episodes that we think is a season, drop them, fuck off for a little bit, start back up. And then, maybe you do 2 seasons a year, like half a quarter of a year or half of a year. And, Corey ended up moving. Jackie got busy with some stuff. And it's like, we have 5 or 6 episodes, but not in a wrapping up sense where I feel like I can put it out. And I also feel like there was the first couple episodes, like the 3 of us had never all interacted together. So there's a weird feeling out phase where it's like a lot of it is, and Corey, and I don't feel bad about saying this because he'd agree, but it's like, it's a lot of Corey. And I just kind of sit back and listen and kind of find my spots to say something, but it's different. And I enjoyed that, but I'm also like wondering now, I'm like, maybe that's just a thing that was for us, and it may never come out, and it may never pick back up, and that's fine. Like, we enjoyed doing it, but I'm doing something else too, where I'm like, I really like this, and at times it makes, like, how easy the other show I do with my 2 friends that live here, and there's more of the human interaction of like being physically present together that I don't get with this, where I'm like, maybe I kind of want to, if like the other thing is where I find more fulfillment, maybe I kind of want to go into that one more, and this kind of takes a back burner so I don't feel as stressed, because it's like when you kind of get to do something and there's not as much pressure as doing a weekly thing and the expectations, you kind of forget like, oh, I enjoy doing this because like of these things, and it's why I started this. All the pressures and shit of doing this after building a rapport with people for 7 years and 400 plus episodes, like that's gets kind of tiresome, and like it's work. And you're like, I didn't know that I was going to do this, and it was going to become like almost a full-time job as a hobby. And so sometimes I see that being a thing where I wonder how long I can sustain this at the current rate I'm going. And I see someone like you where, you constantly talk about like, sorry, I took some time off. I had shit going on and da-da-da-da, but I'm back for now. And I kind of almost like that approach where it's like, I could see your show being more seasonal based, where it's like every so often, like you just drop a handful of episodes. There's your 8 to 10. I'm going to be on tour. I don't know when I'm coming back. I'll see you later.
Well, listen, to me, it's just all about, it needs to have a certain impact with me. It needs to be, it needs to be something that feels profound, that it really matters, like that. Like I do something, I go, this is important. And if it doesn't feel that way, and I think here's the problem with podcasts. And we saw this during the pandemic, this is even before the pandemic, is that anyone can do it, right? And probably most of the podcasts that exist in the world, most music, no one will ever hear them. And you have a situation where, hey, it's a couple friends. Sometimes it's just an excuse for some reason you can have a conversation, but then all of a sudden you put a mic in a room and some headphones, and all of a sudden that same conversation you were having in your kitchen now seems like it's important. so I think it's like this idea that there's no barrier of entry. And people, and that's very appealing to like feel like, oh, I'm having important conversations with my friends, and and I've tried, sometimes I listen to friends' podcasts, and they're terrible. There's no, there's no sense. It's very self-indulgent. There's not really a sense of we're creating something to entertain, to actually think of what a listener is getting out of this experience. There's a lack of thought put into it. There's a lack of what's the theme? Why are we talking? What is the point? Like, what is valid about what I have to say that there should be a microphone in front of me anyway? So there's a certain amount of like maybe delusion or of grandeur in terms of who is. And again, I'm not the gatekeeper. At the end of the day, audiences decide like who's compelling and who's interesting and who has something to say. But I also think this medium, more so than ever, is like it's kind of, I feel like, maybe jumped the shark in some way, where I think there was a purity to podcasting, 8, 9 years ago, where there's like the people at the top of this are making hundreds of millions of dollars. Uh, and I think that changes the motivation, as to, well, why are people doing podcasts? Because they can make money, especially if you're a celebrity, right? And so you're inundated with like, and there's so much of it. It's so vast that it starts to feel less important, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of that. I think, the hard part for me, and like, it's hard at times, like what I'm going to say, it sounds like I'm inflating my own ego, but it's kind of funny because I feel like in doing this show, like I've always felt like someone who suffers from really bad imposter syndrome. And it's funny in doing this show and listening to a lot of other people's shows, like you find that a lot of people feel that way. Like people who are in perceived, successful bands, successful things in entertainment, and everyone's like, I don't know how the fuck I got here. I feel like everyone at any moment is going to be like, hey, you fraud. We found you. And you're going to be like, oh shit. And it's going to go away. And it's interesting to see how so many of us feel that way. And for me, like, I think that's kind of been one of the more like refreshing things about talking to people is almost like humanizing everybody. And I think, a lot of other shows that are more from my perspective, where it's like, I'm not in a band. You don't know who I am. I never was in anything that you would ever know. I'm just someone who happened to stumble across an idea and just kind of bugged people. And so they were like, I guess I'll do this thing. And I think it ends up becoming this thing where I always got some shit going on over there. But I just feel like at times it's hard not to feel kind of jealous of other people, like feeling like they're starting off on like second base, maybe even third base, and they don't realize that they are, and they try to make it seem like they're on the grind, on the come up, and you're like, but you're so and so from this thing, you've got a built-in audience. How bad do you really want this? Or was it a thing where you maybe realized, sort of what you were saying, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a way for you to make money or a lot of money, but I feel like maybe now in today's world where everyone has to be a brand in and of themselves, is it a way for you to progress yourself? So if the one thing that you're doing, you don't have all those eggs in that one basket, you're now able to diversify and, I can be a brand now. I'm a podcaster. I'm, a Twitch streamer. I'm an influencer. I'm these things. And I wonder if it's more of that now for some people, where it's not money motivated, it's personal brand motivated.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I think it's just one element of many other elements. Damn dog. Are you gonna edit this later? That's
Probably not. My dog barks. My dog barks. Actually, I'll say this. If you do edit your dog barking out, don't. Because there are old episodes, and sometimes I'll go back and listen. I can hear my old dog that I had to put down. I can hear her in the background, and I'm like, oh, I miss you.
Well, so this, because you're using this StreamYard thing, I have to use a different mic, and this is like a more ambient mic. My other mic is like, you have to be up on it for it to hear, so it just picks up everything. It's very, very distracting.
Sorry.
No, I think like when I started doing my podcast, one of the things I said was like, having a podcast is almost like having a website. It's just like a conduit for, if you're like a brand, or you're like, think about it, like every website, it's like, oh, here's the Lamb Goat podcast, here's the Metal Injection podcast, here's, it's just like, it's an expectation that that'll be an extension of whatever you're doing. And we can see like, most celebrities or whatever, even if you're a YouTuber, you're going to have a podcast. If you're this, it's all going to kind of filter through that, and I'm sure it's still a growing industry. In terms, it hasn't reached like really where it can be, but I think creatively, maybe for me, it's kind of, I find it to be a little less compelling as a consumer, because again, I feel like a lot of people are just doing things because that's what they're doing, and it is profitable, and it is like, it's any medium, I just want it to grow and I want it to be great. And I want, like I felt like podcasts changed a lot of our lives 10, 12 years ago, and I'm sure that's still happening. I'm not saying it's not, but it's, you just evolve and you kind of have to roll with the punches. So we'll see where it goes. We'll see, if I don't feel like I'm adding anything valuable to the medium, then I probably won't do it.
So the one of the kind of quote unquote hard questions I was going to throw at you was, so in listening to your show, there are times because of the era you came up in, professionally as a musician, you were kind of at that tail end of, record deals being kind of good money. It was before streaming and all that kind of stuff. CD sales were still pretty good. And sometimes in hearing some of the people that you've had on from that era, especially now with you being in Bad Wolves, it feels like at times some people are like blaming everyone but themselves for the downfall of their career. Like you'll hear like, well, if this fucking label would have pushed this single or this album, we would have been huge. If, so and so didn't fuck us, if we could, all these things, they blame everyone other than themselves. And then toward the end of your conversation, they'll also be like, yeah, man, if if Bad Wolves ever needs like an opener on your tour. And I feel like it's this kind of weird spot for you where it's like, where I wonder is sometimes if people saying that, if it's hard not to maybe go like, well, yeah, you're also the person who took that advance. You're the person who, instead of looking at your finances and going, hey, being on two buses isn't financially worth it. How about we maybe do one or even go back to like a van and a trailer? Like you chose these things. And so your career is what happened to it is because of you. Maybe also these other things can be true as well. But then also it's like, I always think of the Drake line when I hear people ask you like, hey, if you ever need someone to come out with Bad Wolves, it's like that Drake line of, they want to help me get back to where they fell from or whatever. And I just like, think of that, like you're their lifeline, no pun intended, to get pulled out of like them not doing shit anymore. And I wonder if like over time, either A, if you've noticed that, or B, if it's really affected you and or these, friendships at all, because you realize like, oh, maybe you're still looking at me as like something you can get from me.
No, I've never felt that at all.
Okay.
In any instance, it's always like, for me, it's probably a mutual thing. Like, yeah, man, it'd be great to do some. I'd love to, I'm sure most of these, if anyone's that's brought up, I probably would have been excited to play with them as well. So it's definitely, I've never felt put upon like that by anyone on the show. And, to kind of speak to what you were talking about at the beginning, I think, yeah, if you listen to enough of my shows, especially ones that are very much in the traditional X-Man format where I kind of go through the anatomy of someone's career and how they got from A to B, yeah, you can kind of, I think that mentality is the rarity on the show where someone is blaming XYZ, but it's happened a few times. And it is kind of emblematic. Like it's pretty interesting how it usually coincides with where their career is currently at. Because I feel like people who have success don't do that. They usually look at things like, hey, this is bad luck, and we just caught a bad break, and whatever. It just it is what it is, and and then they figured things out, and then the next thing kind of manifested. I think people that generally are, especially people that have career trajectories like mine, where they kind of have certain amount of success at a younger age, but it fails to kind of reach its fruition, and they have to kind of figure it out and survive and find out what the next path of their life is. Those people generally have a pretty positive attitude, and they don't worry about, they utilize whatever didn't work out about their previous situation to learn so that they make the better decision next time or have a better attitude or whatever that I've noticed. But yeah, I mean, I did a little kind of, I got inspired in the middle of the night the other day where someone did a post, kind of just a troll post basically saying that, Willow Smith, like, oh, she's not a prodigy. Her parents are rich. That's why it's like just she has unlimited time while we have to work her 9 to 5. And I was just like, what are you talking about? Do you think if she's a prodigy, if she's really young, first off, right? When do you think she got good at all this stuff? When she was 29? No, she got good when she was like 12. No one's working a 9 to 5. You outside of going to school, 12-year-olds basically have unlimited time. Like, what are you talking about? But it just speaks to like jealousy. Just like there's people who just if someone else is ahead of them, if someone else has advantages, they just bitch about it, and it's like, all right, well, you're probably never going to get ahead because, well, so such and such had this, and guess what? It's always been that way. Someone else is always going to have more advantages than you. What are you going to do about it? Be mad, or just go, just do your best. It's always been like that. There's no one, oh well, Will Smith's parents have $500 million. Well, what about the billionaires' kids? Do they have more advantage than her? Should she be mad at them? Like, I don't really know. It's just like, so I think a lot of that stuff all ties together in terms of your attitude about, what things working out or not working out. And I just think the blame game, you gotta start with yourself, because a lot of things that don't go right, you can look at all the bad luck, right? And go, okay, this didn't work out. And you go, well, this person screwed up, this screwed up. Okay, well, how did you screw up? Maybe, doesn't mean all that stuff is invalid. Doesn't mean you didn't have a bad manager, or the label didn't screw you, or the van broke down at the wrong time, or whatever. But if you look in the mirror, you could probably find 100 things that you and the collective members in your group, tons of mistakes you made that were part of that. And if, and so it's just like, it's just a way of looking at things that I think, to me, is because it creates a bitterness. Because I knew people 10, 12 years ago who were just mad that, like, because another band got more successful, and they're just like, because they think they're owed. That person's success. And it's like think about this. Imagine you're like an NBA player, right? You're Charles Barkley, right? And you made, I don't know, $60 million in your career, and then you see some like scrub now, like some mid guy making $30 million a year now. Like, on that space, you should be mad, right? If you're Charles Barkley, like, this motherfucker made $300 million, he couldn't hold my jockstrap, right? Now he could theoretically be mad, but what is that? What good is that going to do? It serves nothing,
Well, I think you almost are like hitting on something that you and I were tweeting about the other day, where, you were talking about what, like, when you tweet or whatever, like, what value are you adding? Like, are you making a positive impact on something? Like, is it of value? And I remember commenting, because literally within, I think, 10 minutes of me seeing that, I had seen someone post like a troll ass post thing, and I almost commented on it, and I was like, what's the point? What am I going to get out of this? Like, I'm not, it's just going to make me upset and angry, because it already has.
I don't just mean, are you adding value? I mean, out of all your output in an environment like that, is the net result of it a more positive or negative effect? Like, are you making people's lives worse? Are you making people more upset? Are you putting more hatred and anger and harassing and yelling and complaining and just whatever, all the, but I think people, it's so stream of conscious, and people don't, they maybe don't see themselves as like a producer of content on there. Yeah. But if you go to someone's page and you just see all their tweets, you get a kind of feel for what's on. And by the way, I find it's rarely in conjunction with how that person, if you met them in real life, is.
Sure.
But it does paint a picture, right? And even myself, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and you have to catch yourself and go, am I just complaining? Am I just yelling at people? Am I just saying, this is a garbage person? Look at this terrible thing. And I'm going, okay, well, what, you have to, I don't think people have a great sense of that. They don't go, and I think a lot of it is, these people over here are terrible. Look at the bad people. I'm great. They're bad. And they're, and even worse than that, they're evil. They're crazy. They're whatever. And it's just like us versus them. Tribalism, that thing. And, I just think it's really destructive. And I think we're going to see some very distinct real world impacts that are related to spaces like this, because people take these mentalities, the way you feel when you've been staring at your phone for an hour, you take that into the real world. You take
Yeah.
that into how you uh, engage with people. Maybe it's going to make you more isolated. Maybe you're not going to go and spend time with people. Maybe you're not going to go touch grass because you've been just in this world, or you have a perception and now you go out in the world and you're looking for enemies. You have an idea. Oh, that woman has blue hair. Well, she must be a feminazi. Blue hair, that person's wearing a MAGA hat. Well, he's a Nazi. I've never talked. He's an actual Nazi. I can't, or whatever. Like, people bring that into the world,
Right?
And it shapes the way we see the world, and then so we go out with a filter, and and we end up seeing people as these categories of human beings and not individuals.
Well, like something. I stumbled across this idea a little while ago, but I was thinking about it today as I was grabbing dinner with my wife, and where we were, like the place where we had to drop my dog off, it's kind of like in a more like country backwoods kind of an area. And so we're sitting at like a Culver's, and I just happened to be staring at a bunch of like the patrons, and almost everyone that I could see that I was sitting next to had like some form of this outfit on, where it's either the hat with the American flag and it's like bullets making the stripes or whatever, the stars, or thin blue line shit or whatever, or something to that effect. And it just made me start thinking again, when did like these things become just who we are outwardly? Like when we go out, we're like, I'm this fucking guy, or I'm this woman, or whatever. And it's like, I don't really ever remember that growing up. I don't remember people tying themselves to like a thing like that. And I've really been trying to figure out like, what is it in us as people that makes it like, is it a sense of community that when you go out and you wear this thing, like, I know I belong to this and this is what I stand for and I'm putting it out there. So when you see me, the first thing you see is this and you know who I am just from that. Like, I don't know if it's like a weird community bonding thing, or I don't know. Like, but I mean, with you bringing up the MAGA thing, it's like, and I think we've talked about this before too, where it's like, I don't know when everyone became so ensconced in one thing represents everything about me.
Well,
a lot of it being political, because I don't remember politics being that important, or things that we talked about so outwardly and divided each other, like where it's like, oh, you're this, oh, I can't fuck with you. Like we found to find ways to go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, my theory with that is things really changed between the Obama era and the Trump era, where with those two individuals, polar opposites, but what they had in common is that they were really a part of broad pop culture, right? Obama wasn't just a guy. He was like on the Tonight Show.
It was kind of a savior of sorts.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, like that was, obviously for people that liked Obama, but his kind of larger than life persona got brought into culture at large. So it became because he was so charismatic and he had great screen presence and all that stuff, and it was very well liked, by Oprah and all that stuff. And and that was one of the criticisms of Obama was, oh, he's a celebrity. There was a campaign ad. He's not, they were like, it's like Obama, Paris Hilton. They were like, and Trump was very similar because he's been famous his entire adulthood. He's in movies. Had his own TV show and all that. And so I think, and because Trump was so divisive right from the outset, and that juxtaposition, that the emergence of someone like Trump is almost a response to someone like Obama. They're like kind of like complete opposite polar different versions of himself. But I think that, and how much attention Trump got on the back of that, it brought politics into pop culture in a way that was very different than it had always been. And then it became about, and because Trump was so divisive, it became about lines in the sand. Either you're with us or you're against us. You're for hate, you're for this, or you're for America, or you're against it, or whatever kind of lines you want to draw. And then I think the conversations about like, oh, the media is fake. It's it's the liberal media, or like this Disney is woke, and this, so like people started to create their own versions of things. So it's like, oh well, you don't, like Gillette, they're a woke company, so we buy these Daily Wire razors. So everything that you own is a signifier of what tribe you're a part of, right? It's like,
Right.
Like buying a Prius at some point was like a signifier, like a social signifier that you care about the environment, for example.
Right.
And so I think, like we would think about these things as like bumper sticker issues.
Right.
So like the reason why someone gets a bumper sticker is because they want to project outwardly their values. And now we've kind of taken the bumper sticker and then created 100 different signifiers, whether it's a hat or a T-shirt, or I drink Black Rifle coffee because I love freedom, right? It can't just can't just have regular coffee. It's just this. I gotta have and there's and by the way and vice versa, right? I mean, if you live in a town and there's a rainbow flag and people want to project that they support LGBT rights or that it's a safe community or whatever. And I think certain things that are, that might be innocuous to someone who agrees with that, and be offensive to someone who doesn't like gay people.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's very interesting, that like I remember I bought like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg shirt, like Notorious RGB shirt during the pandemic. Like, yeah, I got this shirt. And after a while I was like, I'm not going to wear that shirt. She was great. We'll miss her, but I don't, it's like, this idea of wanting to bring in, I guess, whatever attention that it might have. Like, do you want to have a pro-choice conversation when you're out getting, at the supermarket? Is it really worth it? So I don't know. I think that's a good observation that you had, though.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it also stems from the fact that, like, I'm kind of back in working at a screen printing place, and just a lot of the shit we make, I'm like, who the fuck wears this? Like, what is, like, I don't get some of it. Like, I feel like I'm just too old to like be like, that's cool. I'm like, no, this is stupid. Why are kids wearing this? But then again, I'm also wearing a Stay Positive Magic Johnson shirt. So, I mean, but I think shit like that's funny because it's funny.
It is pretty funny. And he's still alive, so we can't.
And he's still alive. Yeah. Yeah, you got to stay positive. You got to stay positive.
By the way,
so it works on a bunch of levels.
What was funny was the guy Enrique Tarrio, who was like the head of the Proud Boys. One of his businesses was he would make T-shirts, but he was selling like pro-Trump MAGA stuff, but he was also selling like Bernie.
Sure.
Like he was selling everything. He was like, I'm selling whatever people are buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny because like my podcast sponsor Rockabilia got into some shit a couple weeks ago because they ended up licensing through the band, but they made and sold the Kanye Burzum shirt. And so I was like, can I get one? He goes, you really want one? I was like, yeah, that's fucking funny. It's funny that it became a thing where it was like the guys in Burzum were like, Kanye's wearing our shirt and everyone hates him for it. So we're going to make a shirt with him on it. And I think that whole idea of like doing that thing.
Oh, it's actually a Burzum.
It's a Burzum. So Kanye was wearing a Burzum shirt. So then Burzum made a shirt with Kanye wearing the Burzum shirt, and it just says Burzum on top of this photo of Kanye wearing the Burzum shirt. It's very meta, but I think it's funny because it's like, okay, in what world did I ever fucking see this happening? And I don't know, it's just fucking funny. And so when I hit up Frankie, I was like, can you send me one? He goes, really? You want it? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm a Kanye fan, so like I think it's funny. Sure. And he was just like, really? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'll wear it on the podcast. He goes, you're going to wear it and like people can see you? And I was like, yeah, it's a fucking t-shirt, man. Like, like, if you know me, like, you know that I don't, like, that's not who I am, but like funny things I think are funny. So yeah, I'll wear it. And I would really be interested to see what people, but I also want it because I think it's such an interesting. No, I'm not paying for it.
Okay.
I'm taking out like what I would have been paid for an episode, and basically we're calling it a wash. But it was a thing where I even think it's more like when I look at it from a step further out, it's like it's just such a snapshot of the culture we live in now, where it's like there would have been a point where people would have been like, Burzum's pretty fucking cool. And then all of a sudden Burzum did what they did, and then they're like, people are like, I don't fuck with Burzum. But then now it's kind of come back around where some people are like, it's so edgelordy and shit to like Burzum because it pisses people off. Well, now they're kind of back in the mainstream. And then Kanye's kind of had the same trajectory a little bit. And then it's like, now you throw the two together and it's like, well, what part do you hate? Because there's so much hate going around these two artists that it kind of is just
the Nazi stuff. That's
right.
That's the part that Burzum is a Nazi band and Kanye is a Nazi. So,
but is he? Because it seems like he's renounced it already again.
What are you talking about? Just literally, he was a video. He's at some party. He didn't renounce anything. He doubled down everything. No,
did he?
No, I'm sorry,
because I thought there was an Instagram post like maybe a month or so ago, or maybe longer than that. Because he was like, "Oh, I'm a fan of Jonah Hill now. I don't hate Nazi, or I don't hate Jews."
Are you serious?
Yeah, you didn't see. I guess because that motherfucker keeps deleting his Instagram, so it's kind of hard for me to keep up with all of the shit.
My man went on a 5-week anti-Semitic pro-Nazi tour where he's doing long podcasts, laying out how terrible Jewish people are. And he does one post where he goes, I like 21 Jump Street. I'm no longer anti-Semitic. And then you take him at his word for that. Come on, man.
Well, it's not that I take him at his word. I think that the whole thing was a troll thing because it's almost going back to like his MAGA hat wearing shit where he's like, I just wanted to rile people up. Wanted people to talk about me.
I'm sorry. You are about as further from the truth as you could be. He's a true believer. He's a Nazi.
Okay. I guess I didn't check out those things. Like I said, motherfucker deletes all his shit.
Watch his Alex Jones interview. Watch his interview with Gavin McGinnis. Watch his interview. Okay. I mean, it's like what I can say anti-Semitic shit. They can't drop me. I mean, come on. I mean, what is? It's not a true. This is what I'm saying. Like we're so inverted that like someone could literally just go, "I love Hitler." We have these Jewish people are a big problem, and we're just like, maybe it's a joke. It's like, no, it's not a joke. He's not joking. And he's like, yes, is he crazy? Yes, he's crazy. But guess what? You can be crazy and also believe terrible things. And the beliefs can be real.
I guess that was I mean, Alex Jones is not really on my radar or shit, so like I'm just like it's not making an excuse necessarily. I didn't know that he did all that, like did that many shows and was talking about all this stuff.
This was the biggest story in the world.
I don't know. I guess I just didn't. Like, I guess that kind of speaks to how I just like sometimes don't see shit. Like when I tell people that, like I'm telling you, like I heard he was on Alex Jones' show, but at the time I was like, where can you find it? Because like literally he's canceled on everything. So how the fuck can you find this thing?
Infowars.com, his website.
Oh, okay. I don't. Never been there. Didn't know that was like how you can find that.
People took clips of it. And like it was all over. Even though it wasn't on YouTube, but people took the clips and just you could watch them. You could probably go on YouTube right now and watch. Long clips of it that people took from there and uploaded. So, but it's like it's to the point where it's like here's he goes. People are saying that you're supporting Hitler, but you just like the uniforms, right? The Hugo Boss. He's like, no. I love Hitler. Literally how he said it.
Fair enough. I didn't know that.
No, he's like Alex Jones is trying to save him from himself. Like,
okay.
He's like, no, you didn't really mean that. He's like, no, I did. I do. And he's like, he goes, you can find a good things about anyone, especially Hitler. Dude, it's hilarious. Like when Alex Jones is the one trying to talk you off the ledge, know you've lost the plot. Dude, he went on Tim Pool's show, and Tim Pool's like,
"Oh, is it? That's the thing that Phil does."
Yeah, and Tim Pool's like, "Well, no, we don't. We're not. He's there with. By the way, both shows he's with Nick Fuentes, who is a Nazi.
Oh, okay.
He is a anti-Semitic neo-Nazi who wants like ethnic cleansing." And hates black people and gay people. Like A literal Nazi. That's his side
So this
partner.
is like some Tyrone or Clayton Bigsby type shit then, for
Yes,
that
but
guy's
it's
perspective,
real.
probably.
This is
Right.
not a. This is what I'm saying. It's so ridiculous. People just think it's a. I mean, the fact that you think it's a troll is insane to me. Like, he's not that smart. He's not. You know. And
I
and
think
by the way,
the
and he did lose his deal. Like, he was a billionaire and is no longer a billionaire.
right.
So I'm amazed. I'll be honest. I'll be amazed anyone can support it, because it's really, at this point, it's like, it's a very interesting thing. I think at this point you literally just have to, like I said, even if you kill someone, haven't half the rappers killed people? There's really no line. There's nothing you can do, right? Chris Brown, you can beat the ass of one of the most famous people, and still there's really nothing you can do. I don't know.
Well, like, sort not necessarily on this topic, but you bring up something else that I've really been thinking about, which is, and oddly, I don't know how I stumbled across this idea, but it was the fact that, like, you using Hitler. We'll use Hitler as like the example since we're already talking about him. Is there a way to be able to look at what that person did, and I'm not saying find positivity in it, but look at it from a learning thing of, like, how did this person do this? How, because, like, to me, if you're able to organize so many people, especially when, like, social media and stuff obviously was not a thing and you just had to do it, it's like, are there things that leaders will say are able to extrapolate from, like, things that he did and go, like, this is a really great way to motivate people for this thing, like something that you can turn it around for more of, I guess, like and positive is the only word I can come up with, and that's not the word that I want to use, but it's the only thing I can come up with, where it's like, can you look at things that were done in a negative light and find a way to talk about them in a way that is kind of like, yes, we can all agree the thing that this person did was very heinous. However, the idea that this person was able to get people on his side and do all of these things and so forth, like, can we look at that and use that as a tactic moving forward for how to, I don't know, whatever, like, inspire people to make this company like a Fortune 200 company or something, like. And I know that I haven't been able to figure out how to kind of make the thought a full thought, like, that makes sense. But I wonder if there's ever a point where we can take something that we all agree that it was horrible, but look back on it and have conversations where we can actually take something from it in a positive light.
Um,
I don't know if that makes any sense at all. Like I said, I know it's a very infant stages of a thought, but it's something I've been thinking about. Just, can you take something that was so bad and find something positive in it to move forward?
well, I think the main thing from events like that is they need to be studied in order to prevent them from ever happening again. So that's the main thing. Yes, I think they need to be studied. Um, but I think to a certain degree, what you're talking about is like the dark arts. It's like, oh, this ability to galvanize a bunch of people and brainwash people and get them to do uh, the most horrific things people can do to other people. And how do I, like, use that to, like,
Actually, I
motivate
guess
my
now that you say it
staff?
like
That's
that,
like,
I guess maybe that's not how. Like, obviously, it's not how I meant it necessarily, but more like when you say it like that, I go, okay, what are the things that led to, like, these things happening? How can we break it all down to where we can either, because, like, part of me goes, like, what qualities did Hitler have that made him such a great leader? Why did people follow him? What were the things? Was it solely fear based? Was it solely timing and place? Was it more? Can we look at other people and kind of extrapolate these things and find the common thread between everybody, and then go, okay, here's how, like you're saying, study it and find a way to, like, make sure that doesn't happen again, but also maybe, like, positive is the only thing that ever comes to my fucking mind, and I'm always like, that's not the word, because, like, it's not a positive outcome. The outcome was not positive, but
well,
can we?
I think there's kind of something broken just in the way Nazi Germany sits in our kind of, like, historical lexicon, because it's so iconic. We have one individual, we have very definitive iconography. It's recent enough that we can still see the impacts of it. That unfortunately it becomes the kind of symbology for all things evil. So, and people lack a kind of a certain amount of historical framework to see other things that are evil besides that. That's the only reference. And so I think in many ways we need to, like, and I wouldn't say I'm the most historically adept person out there.
Clearly I'm not.
but I think it's a little too simplified in the fact that we don't know how to describe a demagogue. We don't know how to describe kind of authoritarian overreach without using this one example, and it makes it and it turns everything into this, like, I don't know, it just dulls our ability to kind of describe things properly because we don't have enough historical depth to go, well, no, it's more like Pinochet, it's more like Stalin or whatever, or what, Mao, or whatever terrible leader that we think we can point to. I don't think we have enough, and I think so. As a point of being kind of focused on it, I kind of equate it to people who are really obsessed with serial killers, right? Which is a lot of people. People are really kind of fascinated with great
Tragedy?
destroyers.
Okay.
Well, no, it's not the tragedy, because if that was the point, they'd be reading books about the victims. They're fascinated by the really horrific people throughout history, and to some degree, being infamous is almost more interesting to people than being famous. It's like, why is Tony Montana, Scarface poster on everyone's, every rapper's room? It's there's a real I think infatuation around great purveyors of evil, because some people essentially are moved by power and what power does. So it's the ability. Oh, this person was able to kill 6 million people. That's power, man. They were able to reshape the world. That's power. And people are, there's this book called The 48 Laws of Power that's like kind of about that. There's all this stuff about being kind of Machiavellian and be able to be a puppet master. And that's why I kind of equate it as like the dark arts.
What was the title of the book again? I'm going to write it down real quick.
The 48 Laws of Power. I forget the name of the author. There's, whether it's or Dale Carnegie, how to win friends and influence people. Listen, people can kind of be interested in whatever they're interested in. I'm not here to police all of that, but I think we can use someone like Kanye West as a kind of a tale of things gone wrong, because what do these people have in common, right? We have people who have great ego, right? Who want to, the thing that is most fascinating to them is, how do I control people? How do I get people to love me en masse? Because once they love me, I can get away with anything. Because people, it's like, we still had kings and queens and things like that, but they don't have like ultimate power. Maybe in some, like, more in the third world, maybe they do. But here it's more in title. They have wealth, and they have some, but they're not like in England. They're not making the laws. They're not, But I think our kings and queens now are celebrities, and if you're a billionaire, you can kind of get away with anything. You're a little bit above the law, right? You can use that money and you can change laws and lobby and start PACs and do all kinds of things to kind of manipulate things. But I think we've seen this with people in positions of power, that they want to exist in a place where they can do anything, and they can control people and have people do, you do this, you do that, jump on one leg, bark like a dog, eat her butt, go out there, slap yourself in the face. Like, I think that power is intoxicating, and it's always going to go some kind of way. And I think being infatuated with figures like a Hitler, I think is a little sus. Let me put it that way.
I guess, I mean, as someone who's like, it's funny because like hearing you say like people are, why do rappers really get infatuated with Scarface? And to me, like my first thought was, oh, it's because it's someone who came from nothing and built his own wealth and kind of became somebody. That's where
Yeah,
my mind
these
immediately goes.
motherfuckers
But
did
like,
not watch the movie. The dude is an ass clown whose empire lasted about 4 weeks.
yeah,
Got high on his own supply, wanted to
yeah,
bang his own sister, shot his best friend, and then got real quick. All right,
yeah.
died at 32. All right, shot. All right, these motherfuckers did not watch the movie. His character, as soon as he got a little success, turned into a moron. So
Right.
they just watched the first half, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. I was like, because like when I hear people like Scarface, and it's like why, and like everyone goes, well, because it's a story of come up. It's a come up story, and it's like well, that's only part of it. The other, it's also then what do you do once you have the power? Well, he acted like a dick and got his, and it's like I think too often like. And obviously, I'm guilty of it because I just kind of outed myself for being kind of, I don't want to say superficial, but just kind of very surface level with what little bit of information or the part that you're pulling out of something. Like, but I also think it kind of speaks to a slightly bigger thing where can you separate the person from either the art or the thing that they do or are known for? I think for me, like, I often wonder are some people so talented, so smart that they essentially just become fucking stupid because like they just can't no one can understand like what they think and what they are do and they can't articulate it to anyone that it makes sense to them, not excusing people for saying horrible shit or doing horrible things, but I wonder at what point is the cost of being so smart, is that the downfall of being that genius, is that eventually it just fucking tanks you down the line.
Well, I think Kanye is a very unique figure. I don't even know who I would compare him to historically, uh, and I think what we have to realize is there's different kind of like sinner, right? Like so we look at like an R. Kelly, right, who's doing crimes that are definable with definitive victims uh, that are horrific, and and he was still engaging in them, and it was like, whereas Kanye, it's like it's a different kind of thing where he is essentially, it is his message is part and parcel with his art, right? So part of his being an artist is I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna speak my mind. So he's running for president. He is doing. I'm gonna go do an interview on uh, Tucker Carlson. I'm making myself a political figure. I'm making myself a thought leader. So that is part of what you're putting out there. Once you decide I'm going to be a political figure, and then I'm going to put out records and I'm going to actively make this a big part of who I am and what I put out, then it becomes open season. And then you go, okay, well, if there's 10% more anti-Semitism out there because Kanye West decided to move the Overton window on neo-Nazism, that's a really bad thing. Like, and again, this is the social media era. Ideas move faster. They move quick, man. Like you can, it's like flat Earth is more popular now than it's ever been only because of the internet. Is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing, right? We don't know how to figure that. We don't know how to really fight bad information with good information. Lies move quicker. They're more appealing. They're more exciting. Hate, and that is all that a hateful headline is going to get way more attention than a loving one. So it's a different kind of like perception, right? Or you take a situation, like someone did a crime a long time ago, but they actually are sorry about it, and it's in the past, and they've moved on, and they want to like be a different person. That's a different kind of thing than someone who's like actively engaging in something. But to me, like someone like Kanye, where it's like it's not that he committed a crime per se, but he is the influence and how he's changing hearts and minds is it's a battle we're currently in. And then you have to say, is it, to me, the problem with Kanye is like at a certain point, putting him on a show where he's putting these hateful things out there, it is spreading these ideas. Like it is, and it's like, and you want that on your conscience that, oh, now there's, 1,000 more young kids who think hating Jewish people is okay because Kanye said it was cool. This is how this is how these ideas stay alive, is because there's just a kernel of something that, and again, he's still a compelling speaker. He's not, he's definitely not a dumb person. And on some levels, yeah, I think he does have, those elements of genius, I think in his creativity and being like untethered from like the rules is a key to his greatness, but it's also the key to his downfall. Going, well, the rules say you can't do this. I'm like, yeah, well, certain rules are good rules, all right? Don't drive 175 miles per hour. I think that's a good rule.
Right.
We should have some rules. This is not the Matrix, all right? You are not Neo, where the rules don't matter to you, all right? You can just stop there. You're a person, all right? We should have enough humility to go, okay, we should have most freedoms, but there all should be
parameters.
We should have red lights and green lights. Is that a good rule?
Yes.
There's a couple. We don't, freedom, but just things in a little bit.
Also had me look up what Overton window was because I never heard of that before.
Yeah, well, the Overton window is just basically about extending the parameters of what is acceptable. And so this is we've seen that kind of for a lot of issues, like for example, like when Trump ran for president, no one was advocating to build a wall except for Trump.
Right.
And at the time that seemed like a very extreme thing to kind of like plant your flag on, and now it's just a common belief amongst a wide variety of people in the country. So it went from being something that was very divisive to being very common. So he expanded the Overton window on that issue.
Always interesting when people are able to bring new words into my vocabulary, expand my own mind.
It's a good one.
That's a good one. I mean, literally made me look it up as you were talking. I was like, Overton window, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, but again, it's to me, like I look at someone like Chappelle and how he kind of mainstreamed anti-trans sentiment, and he did that, and you can literally look at a chart like people accepting of LGBT community, and now it's going down for the first time in 30 years. And I think because politics is downstream of culture, and no one's more charismatic or a better storyteller or funnier than Dave Chappelle. And so you have someone you trust tell you something in a way that's entertaining. Now that's just a commonly held belief by a large segment of people, so that influence totally matters, and depending on where you stand on either on any subject, it's just something that we have to kind of, for me, like I do my little 2 cents and kind of try and inflect a certain amount of, hopefully like a corrective measure of like why I think something is so destructive. And again, some of these attitudes, like it's just, I don't want to go too deep into it, but a lot of things that were considered third rail, like for example, like things people say on Twitter now, just like outwardly, just like racist things, anti-Semitic things, anti-trans, anti-gay. It's like they don't even, like, people used to at least have shame. They would hide, and now it's like they don't even feel the need to hide anymore. Because there's enough social acceptance of like pretty tough things where they don't. I think where people probably don't even think that they're being bigoted. You know.
I think that's like one of the crazier things. Like when when you see it in person, someone just saying like really ignorant shit, you're just like, really, really, you're just saying that like out loud. If there's no part of your brain that was like, don't say that. You're saying that, don't say that out loud. And then, because I mean, like now, I mean, like you were talking a while ago about how Twitter is just like all the shit, it just pops into your feed. Like, I can say how many like fights video things I see, and I swear I block them or, you know, so don't pop up in my shit. But they do, because there's new ones. But it's like I was watching one today that happened to go by that it was just like a bunch of white kids at a pool talking to a black dude. Guess one of them said the N word. And he took all seven of them on, just started whooping their ass, and they were like, and like I looked at one of the comments, and someone's like, or no, actually I think it was O'Shea Jackson that shared it. That's how I saw it because I follow him. And he was like, I know one thing that someone could say to one dude that would make one dude want to fight seven other guys, and it was a thing where I'm like, at what, like, even if you have seven of your best friends, why the fuck would you say that? Like, why? They're like, why would you do that? Like, and it's a thing where like. Not necessarily, but like in the lady, I don't know, a bunch of people that are internet sleuths are like, oh, you can see his mouth say the N-word, and then that's when he gets popped in the face like immediately. And then someone's like, oh, you can hear him saying, oh, he said this, and other people saying, oh, he said this, and it's like, I mean, I can't hear shit, my hearing's shot, but I didn't hear it. I can't read lips either, so like I'm just taking the internet's word for it. But I like, it's still a thing where like if that. Yeah, it's still, well, clearly, we already established that about 20 minutes ago, why I shouldn't. But it's a thing to me where, like, seeing stuff like that, it's like, I don't know. I just, again, maybe it's my age. Maybe it's because, you know, we grew up before the internet and stuff like that. There's so much stuff like that that I just don't feel like was ever really prevalent. And the only instances of things like that, like, for me personally, that I ever went through where I felt like it was kind of a weird thing was, you know, growing up out east, it's like, you know, not saying Delaware's a hotbed for diversity, but, you know, I had way more diversity growing up out there where I had people with friends and family like in Philly and New York and other surrounding areas. And then I moved out here to a smaller town in Michigan, and I went from having like maybe a 70, 30, 60, 40-ish split of like white to black to moving out here, and there were 3 fucking black people in the entire school district. And one of them was our teacher. And it was just like, the fuck is this? Like, this is weird. It was a very big culture shock getting called, you know, slurs and stuff because I'm wearing regional teams from where I grew up, and it's suddenly now not any of the teams of where I live. You know, being called names because I'm like being called gay because I listen to Boys to Men and stuff like that. It's like, I'm sorry that I grew up listening to pop and rap and stuff like that and like R&B. And you guys apparently don't. The first thing that was like inherently Michigan when I moved out here was someone showing me ICP, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, that was weird. But I feel like people don't, I don't know, it's very weird how I think people, like you said, are very brazen to just say shit that I would imagine no one would ever fucking say to anybody. Because it's like it.
Well, again, but this goes back to my point about the Overton window, is that slowly but surely environments change, and these things, it's, you know, I think we have this idea, you know, especially, you know, with Elon buying the company, about free speech and what that means to different people. And I think for some people it's literally like, you know, and people will say, listen, it's a truism in that, you know, free speech exists for the worst things to be said. Like if it doesn't protect the worst speech, then it's kind of pointless. And I totally understand that, but I also understand that the First Amendment is there to protect that no law shall be made to hinder someone's free speech. It has nothing to do with, you know, someone, you know, calling you a slur in like a Starbucks. You know, they don't have that right. You know, they don't have that right, or how this exists in these online platforms where there are terms of service. And we want environments to be, we want to be able to exist in these environments without being kind of like mentally tortured.
Please. Oh.
You know, because the truth is, if people use their speech to make you feel so uncomfortable you don't want to be there, then that actually hinders your ability to you know what I'm saying? It's like if if I was out and let's say we were in the town square and I have 100 people yelling at me, right? Do you think I'm going to stay in that town square? No, I'm going to leave.
No.
Right.
Right.
So it's using speech to hurt other people's ability to use their speech or at least feel okay in an environment. It's a very difficult conversation, but I think people have taken that to go, no. Not only can I say the worst things, I'm going to actively do that for the main reason that it makes you feel bad, that it actually hurts you. And this idea that like, we know what verbal abuse is. We know what emotional abuse is, right? It's like how many people hate themselves because some parent told them that they were worthless, right?
Yeah.
Their whole life. This idea that like words don't have an effect. Oh, just be tough. It's like, no, like people like we have the most depressed people ever. You don't think being online has anything to do with that? And yet so we're always playing this game between kind of safety and control and creating an environment that is helpful and freedom, right? And you can't have both. At least not in totality, right? Because total freedom is actually total chaos, right? Because then it's free for all, it's a Royal Rumble, right? But then ultimate control is authoritarian and it's restrictive and it's not expressive and it's not. We don't want that either. We want some balance where people can express themselves, but there's also, it's not so chaotic and so destructive that it's making everything worse. But I think all environments are like this, right? And in the real world, right? We don't want a police state where if I, throw a piece of gum on the ground, I get my arm chopped off by the government. But we also don't want, Escape from New York, where it's a hellscape, and there's like marauders, so it's. But the problem, I think, people have a difficult time seeing the internet spaces in the same way that we understand the real world to be, because though these same people go, you go to LA and there's homeless people. I'm like, I thought you wanted freedom.
Right.
Well, which one do you want? Do you want control or free? Because and the truth is it's a combination of both, and it's just about the balance, and finding that right balance between freedom and expression and all that stuff. So
I think like one of the bigger things, and we'll kind of go on to like kind of a last question so I don't take up your whole night. I think the other thing too is like you always see people who are like, well, I should be able to say what I want to say, and you're like, sure, but there's going to be repercussions for what you say. And I think that's the thing is like people want to just pop off and say whatever the fuck they want, but then they also don't want to deal with the repercussions of said actions. And it's like, you don't get to have it both ways, man. Like, yeah, sure. Freedom of speech. Say whatever the fuck you want. You say some shit to the wrong person though and get your ass whooped or killed. Well, that was the cost of the freedom of speech.
Wow, they should be killed for the shit they say. I mean,
no, but like, damn well that like if someone, that shit happens though.
Well, I think, I'm sure it does. And
I also took that to an extreme, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more, I think it's really strange, because I think there's, like, I don't think that's correct, either. Like, all right, I say something mean to you, and then you punch me in the face, right? Like, obviously that's probably how like 90% of fights start, right? Is usually through some form of speech or argument. But I think the ways in which we kind of speak about this currently, it's usually like someone losing a job or someone losing an opportunity or someone, having some other kind of repercussion that, we get that gets categorized as this thing called cancel culture. But some of that, I always say, it's like, it's kind of always been that way. It's just now there's a speed and the way things get out there, it has a way of just, back in the day, people go, oh, we used to have free speech. I'm like, but what could your speech do? If you were just yelling on a corner, like, what did it do? It didn't do nothing. You couldn't affect anything. No one, now when you say some wild shit, it can get retweeted a million times, and now half the world has heard what you have to say. And that's potent, So it's like, because it has such ability to spread, you would think people would be more responsible. They go, you know what? I should be more careful about what I say, because if I say something that's like really stupid or really hurtful or really just whatever out of pocket, it is being magnified to such a great degree that there will be more scrutiny, and because of that, there will be more repercussions. And you just have to figure, and I don't think all these situations are fair. Like, I don't think people should be fired for a lot of things they do. But there's also situations where it's like, well, it kind of like, if you say really terrible things, like, do people have a right to like not have you at their company if it was like, I think black people should be eradicated from the earth, right? You put that on Twitter. Does a company have to have the right to go, we kind of don't think you fit our values here. We feel like you're kind of, and then people go, oh, well, that's different. I go, why is it different? All you're doing is saying, you're just saying that there are certain subject matter that you will make an exception for. I'm like, all right, so that means between that statement and there's a whole spectrum of things that someone could possibly say that, could be an issue, right? And so people don't really want to confront that. This idea that right. like this thing happened with Candace Owens. Do you follow this at all? Like, she got fired, or she was split. She parted ways with Daily Wire. They say she got fired. By the way, she probably didn't get fired. They probably made a mutual agreement where she was let out of her contract, and she probably got paid, and they're fine. But anyway, she's putting out all this pro-Palestinian stuff, anti-Israel stuff, and people are like, how dare they? That's cancel culture. I'm like, no, the Daily Wire is a propaganda company. They hire people for their opinions, right? So if there was a host of the Daily Wire and all of a sudden they want a hardcore right-wing conservative, and then the next day they came in and they were a liberal lefty, they go, well, we're a propaganda company. You're not doing the propaganda we want, so we won't hire you. It's like if I, if I'm hiring a motherfucker to look like Batman, and he shows up and he's 300 pounds, like, dude, I hired you. You had a six-pack. Like, that's not the job description. The job description is for you to be, like, I'm hiring you for your opinions. So right. If your opinions change and it doesn't fit the company line, it's like people cannot get that in their head. It's like, no, you're supposed to be able to say whatever you want, and then nothing can ever happen. I'm like, no, that's not how the world works, motherfucker. It's like, if I work for Pepsi and I go on Twitter, I'm like, there's Dookie in the Pepsi. You don't think they're going to fire me?
Yeah, 100%. Coke might hire you then.
I'm just saying, but people, they just want, like you said, they just want to be able to say anything, and I should be able to say anything and nothing can happen. I'm like, not right. I mean, maybe in a perfect world, that'd be nice, but it's not really the world we've lived in. We've never lived in that world. I don't know what people really expect. Unless you extended the First Amendment to that. No, not only can not the government not pass a law, but also no one's allowed to fire you for anything you say. You'd have to pass another law,
Yeah, anyway. Yeah. And then obviously that'll cause a whole bunch of other problems down the road too.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Speaking to kind of really tee this up for me really well when you were like, some people don't realize like what they say has ramifications in real world instances. I feel like because the last time I had you on, I gave you the most throwaway fucking joke question of when's God forbid coming back, and you were like, I don't think anyone gives a shit or something to that effect. And I couldn't believe how fucking far that spread, because to me, it literally was just a joke. Because I think in the conversation we were sort of talking about how the new thing has been all these bands that, kind of went away or, lost their luster or whatever, come back and do these great tours or whatever. So the whole joke was, yeah, so when's God forbid coming back? And I think you kind of took it very much sort of the same way with a little like grain of like, yes, I understand what you're saying is kind of you're joking, but here's kind of a little bit of reality mixed in with it, like where I honestly sit with the question as a real question. Out of curiosity, did that going as far as it did that kind of start maybe some of the for you and maybe the other guys going, well, shit, maybe there is something here. Maybe people do want us to come back. Was there a little bit of an impetus of that being the Kickstarter for that to start being a thing?
It's possible. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think some of it is just like you can kind of set your clock to this stuff, like when a band kind of goes away, and also like the time period that takes place from your kind of seminal work that people connect with. That 15-year kind of mark, all of a sudden things start. People go, you know what, that I do miss that band. I do remember that, right? They start getting that nostalgia starts kicking in, and but
Right.
at the time I was more meaning from the fact that like there was no offers, no one was there was no like I could
Traction.
sit there in my head. What's that?
There was no traction kind of to start everything. Like there was none
No,
of that to
well,
be like, well,
well, no, but you would hear like these rumors about like Refused before they got back together, and they were like, "Yo, every year these festivals
Coachella.
offer
Yeah.
them money, and they say no, and every year it gets bigger and bigger." And that wasn't our experience. We weren't. It
Mm.
just wasn't happening. So I was kind of just saying, yeah, like it would be from my perspective, it was just like a handful of people online, or like some people I'd see at a show. It didn't feel like a such of a groundswell. And I think the when we did announce reunion, we did it. There's definitely it's a real thing. It's hard, again, it's hard to understand how big it is. I still don't think in the grand scheme it's that big, but it's
Mm.
significant. Where it definitely in certain places for certain people, because I think it's not necessarily you don't need a million people, but if you have a few thousand people who are really excited, um, then that can really carry a lot of weight to it.
Mm.
And so we've done some very pinpointed specific things. Every time we play a few more shows than we did previously, and yeah, so it's been really fun. It's a little surreal because again, I'm not into the nostalgia thing. I don't really need, I'm not trying to relive the past. I'm just trying to have a relationship with the music and the
Mm.
people that we play with, and find a way to connect that to like the people that enjoy it, and hopefully there's something there, you know. So it's been very interesting, but it's been cool. It made me really kind of have a new appreciation for the music, because it
Mm.
felt getting together and playing it. It didn't feel old. It
Mm.
felt current. It had a vibe to it that felt very like it aged well.
It's just kind of interesting because like I've inadvertently thrown something out there. I've asked a question sometimes on the show and it gets picked up randomly and like things like so the Misery Signals farewell tour. I had asked Jesse a while back. I was really expecting Carl to be on this record. I figured maybe fences have been mended. You would kind of do like a kill switch thing where like when Howard took over, Jesse was on a song. When Jesse took over, Howard was on a song. Like you kind of see this like sort of passing of the torch moment for some bands where they'll kind of acknowledge where they came from and where they're going or whatever. Would that be a thing that like was ever entertained, or would you be interested in that? And he was like, having me been in Carl's side where I was ousted from the band and was on bad terms, like I would love to have him come back. I'd love to do something with him. I think it would be great for the fans and for the band's whole history. Now here we are. They're doing a farewell tour. Everyone's going to kind of do the thing and send the band off on a note. But it's kind of weird because like I sent a thing to Jesse where I was like, as someone who asked you this question just from a fan's perspective, and like I didn't think much of it, and now here we are a couple of years later, and it's actually happening. Like I'm not saying I caused that. But like it's a thing to me where sometimes asking these questions, it's just like it's weird how sometimes when you ask them, it's coming from a place of either like what I did with you, where it's just kind of a joke, and then it happened, and it's like, oh shit, like how much of maybe the seed of like the impetus of this thing, like how much of it actually carried on and became a thing. And to me, like with you, I thought it was really cool. The only like, because typically when something gets picked up from the show, it's always bad, and people, are very divided on whatever the thing is, and I hate that. I think for me, the thing that was really cool about that was that it was like so overwhelmingly positive for all of you that I was like, I hope you are seeing it, and I hope you do, at the very least, share it in a group text with everyone, and you're just like, hey guys, isn't this rad? People actually gave a fuck. Still do. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's broad appreciation, for all the cool things we've done, and it's like they're very like pinpointed though, right? We get to do we're together for a week or a few days, and you kind of absorb it all, and then it goes away. You're kind of it's over there, and then we we're kind of, it's pretty spread out. We've been doing all these things, so it's listen, I think everyone really appreciates it, and just some of the opportunities we're getting offered, and some of the conversations we're just a part of. It's pretty amazing, how much more interest you get, or some of the numbers and stuff that you never even approached, back in the day. To see it kind of on that level, it's very cool. But it's I at the same time I also keep it in perspective. It's not like we're playing Madison Square Garden or something. It's still
Not
like
yet.
Huh?
I said not yet.
Well, not as a headliner, but it's still, I think there's a modest element to it, and just keeping that in perspective, and just being a part of anything that I think has historical relevance, and kind of being able to celebrate that, I think is great. And I think everyone just is just happy that we do something and people do give a shit about it, and I do think there's still that competitive element where it's like, oh, we want to do, we're playing with this band, we gotta crush them, we gotta hope we sell more merch, or we do whatever, all that stuff, or we're on the boat, and we want to have the best crowd, or whatever, so that stuff still kind of creeps in, but it's none of it's the most important thing. It's just like do the shows, connect with people, try and play really well, and have fun. That's the main thing. Just try and have fun with it. That's that and it's been a lot of hard work to put this together. So that's like probably the thing that gets in the way of the fun, is just you're just busting your ass to try and make it all work. It's a lot of effort. But yeah, we just got an offer of really cool thing coming up. So hopefully we're gonna plan some stuff for the end of the year, kind of last third of the year.
I just think it's cool that it like actually manifested, and you guys are back in some capacity, because like Refused, like that was a band I never thought I'd get to see, and it was just like incredible. Now I've seen them I think 3 times, and I think it's sort of diminished returns at this point. Like they're
because they
out.
came back as like a real band, and I think that's same kind of At the Gates has come back as a real band, Carcass has come back as a real band, and I think that's a different type of endeavor, because then eventually the hype kind of settles down, and then you kind of find what level you're really at, and then it becomes you're just in the rat race again.
Yeah. But I think I'm hoping eventually there will be a show somewhere out here more in the Midwest, so I can actually try to see you guys play again, because I wasn't even of drinking age the last time I got to see you guys.
Yeah, it'd be killer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I think I only put my foot in my mouth once in the last like hour and a half. I'm sure I'll get some backlash for it, but you know what? That's just, I'm not afraid to be, proven, have my ideas or whatever challenged, because I think that's the other reason I like doing this, because you get to learn something about somebody else, and usually walk away with at least a thought or something that carries over that you consistently think of from there, and that's how you grow, having conversations with people. So thank you for doing this as always. And where can everyone find you, or anything you would like to plug?
At Coyle. That's all my socials. Bad Wolves. We're heading down toward POD, going across the the U.S. Nation. So go over to badbullsnation.com, tickets, VIP, all that stuff. And just put an album out called Die About It. Got some new songs out. We did a song called Knife. That's pretty new, just came out. Did a song with Nick Nocturnal called Octane. That's really cool. And you
guys doing that on the tour?
No, we're not playing that song.
No?
We're playing Knife though. So
okay.
Yeah.
I would have figured you guys.
Octane song, it's not even our song, really. Just, he wrote the music and then DL sang on it. So
I saw Poppy and she did the on that Avenge tour and she did Van, and that's not technically her song.
Yeah, but it's also like, the biggest song in the world. And she, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
okay. So when Octane goes number one, then you'll put it in the set list.
I mean, it's got over 1 million streams. It's done pretty well.
Yeah. So you're leaving money on the table.
It's
People are
his
going to come
number
out and
one
be like,
song.
well. I do like that new thing that everyone's been doing where now instead of it being whoever the actual guest is, it's the band. I think that's been an interesting, I think it was Andrew from TGI was telling me that the reason that is so that way when you search for a band, it pops up versus the individual artist from the band.
Yeah, it's
which
smart.
I think is a clever.
Helps
yeah,
everybody.
it is. I was like, oh, I'm so dumb. Why didn't I think of that being the answer to that question? But good chatting with you. I got to get ready to pack for Atlanta because we're leaving in about 6 hours.
All right, brother. Well, be safe.
Absolutely.
And let me know when this comes out. I'll repost it, all right?
Yeah. Last question. Absolutely. How do you feel about the next season going into the playoffs coming up?
We lost Randall. I don't think they're going to go very far.
You don't think Brunson can do it?
I mean, you need OG back. You need Mitchell Robinson back. I just think without having that second option as a kind of a security valve, and also just Randall's, like, they're just small right now without those guys, and so they're playing like 4 guys under 6'4", and there's just they've been getting their ass kicked the last few days. They had a couple really tough losses, and it's just and guys are playing like way too many minutes. It's just I think the Randall thing is because I think if at full strength, I think they could have competed with just about anybody, and maybe they can go to the conference finals or something like that. And now I think that's out of the question.
So in forever New York Knicks terms, wait till next season.
Hey, I mean, listen, they're a really fun team. They've had a really great season, and it's just some bad luck at the wrong time. And hopefully, but keep in mind there was a big turnover year because they traded a lot of guys, and each year gets a little better in terms of like what they're working with. So I think, to me, all I want is a competitive team. I don't need them to be like the best team. As long as they're like a good team and they're competitive, I'm pretty happy. So
there you go. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, and I'll talk to you some other point.
Thanks, buddy.
See ya. So that was my conversation with Doc. Want to thank him once again for taking the time to do the chats before his busy schedule kept him on the road and doing podcasts and all that other stuff. There was something I wanted to mention in the intro, but I thought it would make more sense to address it here in the outro. When doing this podcast, I learn a lot about other people just as much as I learn about myself. And something that I had really kind of struggled with and wrestled with since doing this chat, even in the moment, was sort of when we got to talking about Kanye and the Burzum shirt through Rockabilia. Obviously, that whole part didn't really paint me in a great light. And honestly, I could have cut it out. And I'm not, and I didn't, because I realize it's a valuable teaching moment for myself, and I think maybe for others. While I definitely think it put my foot in my mouth and made me look ignorant to a lot of things, I think the bigger thing that I learned since then was sort of having this accountability of owning your shit, whatever that may be or what it looks like. And I think for me in this situation, what it looks like is I repeatedly on this show talk about how I don't really try to be active on social media much anymore. I kind of casually pop in. Facebook, I don't have on my phone. I removed it probably almost 2 years ago at this point. at least a year and a half, which sort of causes a problem when someone's like, hey, pull up your Facebook real quick. And I'm like, I don't have it. And I'm not going to try to log in through, a web browser and all that shit because I don't remember my login. It's all saved on my computer and stuff. So the point being, I'm kind of that way with a lot more of my socials where I kind of just pop in, see something for a hot minute, and then I kind of bounce. So when it comes to what Kanye's been going through, I'm not going to be completely naive and say, or I don't even know naive is the word. I'm not going to say that I haven't been keeping up with what's been going on, but I will say that I have casually, at best, been keeping up with what's going on. And a lot of me keeping up with what's going on is more Kanye when he posts, it will be suggested in my feed because he'll have deleted everything. And then I see that. And then basically I see I saw the thing of I think it was something to do. And again, this is sort of been what caused part of the problem with my lack of knowledge. So it was the thing where when I pop into Instagram, I'll sometimes see a post and then sometimes I'll have to backtrack and see a couple of other posts that he's shared. And so there was an incident that I think he was talking about maybe a year or so ago now where he had been let go by everybody. He was basically claiming that the powers that be at Adidas were fucking him. They were taking his shoe designs and repurposing them for something else, not paying him for what he should have been paid for. And that kind of got, and I'm really paraphrasing, I saw a lot of that and I was like, all right, this is not really of any interest to me. I never bought a pair of Yeezys. I never really cared about the clothing side of things. And I guess that's really where it boils down to. A lot of Kanye's personal shit, I don't really give a fuck about. I never really have. And I mean, it's funny. I think the only frame of reference to any of the personal shit I had was the whole Taylor Swift thing. But that's because I was watching the VMAs or whatever. I think it was the VMAs because that's what my wife watches for entertainment. I really don't give a fuck about them. So I remember seeing that, and I remember the backlash and the fallout of that. And then I remember when My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy came out and watching the trailer movie that had some of the songs in it and stuff like that, and then finally getting the album. I remember saying to my wife when we were first dating, and I was like, if you have to deal with all the bullshit publicly that Kanye has to deal with, but this is the end result is an amazing album full of self-reflection and all that kind of stuff, then I feel like everything is worth it in the end. And I've kind of always felt that way about myself, people in general. I feel like if you are able to go through something tumultuous and in the end learn something or something creative in a positive light, something great is able to come out of it, then I kind of feel like that negative then kind of gets flipped into becoming a positive, because ultimately I would hope that we can all learn to grow as people. I mean, it's something I've talked about on the show quite a bit. And it becomes this thing where that's sort of been my stance. I don't really pay attention to a lot of the things that he does personally. I kind of hear about them, but I don't really delve too much into it. So when Doc brings up well, didn't you see the Alex Jones thing? My first initial reaction was well, no, because Alex Jones has been canceled, and I don't think he has as far as I know, he didn't have a platform on anything. So how would I see something he did when he doesn't have any way to have it be seen? And that is spoken out of naivety of not understanding, I guess, that Alex Jones has his own platform. I guess in this day and age, everyone technically can, so you're not really canceled, and goes back to the whole thing of Andrew and I's conversation, which happened after the Doc conversation, but, no one's ever really canceled. Different talking point entirely, but it was a thing where I really realized that I kind of put my foot in my mouth on that, not realizing that there's all of this extra stuff that exists that I should go through and research and watch before I spout off on something like it's 100% fact. And I think that speaks to a larger problem that we typically have here in our culture now, where everyone's so obsessed with a fucking headline that they read the thing or they listen to the thing, even going back to what I said in the intro, people kind of commenting on the clip of Andrew and I's conversation versus taking it into consideration of the whole 2-hour conversation. So that said, I didn't do my due diligence to really research everything else that Kanye's been going through, everything that he said verbatim and all that kind of stuff versus clips that I'd seen that he's posting out of context of everything else. So that's 100% my fault. And I take full responsibility for the things I said, not knowing the full spectrum of everything. But I'm going to at least own everything in this chat with Doc, where it kind of went off the rails for a little bit. But I also like the fact, and this is something else in light of doing this episode, that I really think is something of value, that I appreciate that Doc actually took the time to try and educate me in real time about what was said, where the resources can be found. Because I think too often when we have these discourses, people are too quick to say something but not back it up, not give any factual information, not give any sites to where you can be like, hey, if you want to find this, it literally exists here, here, and here. And it's funny because it reminds me of, Doc and I can I'll say at least, I don't know how old the average person is that listens to this necessarily, but back when we used to have to do book reports and stuff like that, and you had to, do a bibliography and cite your sources to where if you went to the library, okay, it was at this library and it was on this book and you can find it in this section, like you had to do all that shit. And anymore, you can just say, oh, I saw on the internet somewhere. And it's like, well, that doesn't count. So I do appreciate that Doc took the time to actually not just shut down and or disregard anything I said, but to try to have the conversation and expand my way of thinking about things and looking at things and how I can view the information he's given me, as well as giving me the sources to go watch those and then make an opinion based on what I now have that he's got. So I think that's a bigger thing. This whole episode, this whole week, this whole conversation with Doc really, and the relationship and the continuation of our conversations on record or not. I enjoy that, and I have gratitude for our relationship because it's one of growth. It's one where I constantly am able to say something and either be challenged or continue a thought. I mean, even the thought I had, and then I posed it to Doc in the episode of, when does wrapping your whole identity around a cause, when did that start happening? When did that start happening, and what does it look like moving forward? And I like that he liked that idea, and we kind of expressed it a little bit further. That's kind of why I enjoy this medium. And this is one of the few instances where I can say that I maybe wasn't presented in the best light, and instead of editing it and making myself look the way I want to be presented, which I think is more akin to what we do on social media. We only present the best parts of ourselves. We never really present the parts of us that maybe aren't as refined or not, the edges haven't been smoothed over and such. This is me. Good, bad, or indifferent, however you feel about it. I am a person. I try to be compassionate, and I try to be understanding and loving of everybody. And I want to grow and be a better person every day. And sometimes through my own struggles and whatever, or my own hangups, that's not always what happens. So take that for what it's worth. Again, I didn't mean to go on a 10-minute soapbox, but it's kind of the difference when you don't do these week in and week out, and you have some time to reflect on yourself and reflect on these episodes that you do and how they manifest in real time. This is essentially how I also approach therapy. I think I've said before, I would have access to my therapist 24/7, texting, emailing, whatever. And I chose to sit with what we had discussed and see how it panned out in my day-to-day life, and then come back a week later and discuss that. So this is me essentially kind of doing what I did in therapy, in the intro and now here in the outro. All that said, I apologize for doing all this, keeping it so long, but it is something that I feel was needing to be explained and discussed, and doing it very quickly and glossing over it didn't do it justice. So, all of that said, let's start wrapping up the episode. If you would like to keep up with Doc, you can do such on Instagram and Twitter at Doc Coyle. He has a couple of Facebook pages as well. I'm not sure which one's like the personal one and which one's like the public one. Just search out Doc Coyle and you'll be able to know, because you should be able to like it. If you'd like to keep up with Bad Wolves, you can do such on Facebook and Instagram at Bad Wolves Official. Twitter is at Bad Wolves. Go listen to Doc Coyle's X-Men podcast. It is a great podcast. He's on tour right now, so it's not really being done currently. I think the last episode was a couple of weeks ago. And obviously, I didn't even touch on Doc going through some shit in light of Bad Wolves' former singer popping up in the news. If you would like to see any of that, literally just search it out. I'm not going to really address it here, but the one thing that did kind of come out of it that I felt was very interesting, just paying attention to life and kind of what things people are going through. Similarly, Doc, came to the conclusion after all of that, that he has a lot to be grateful for and to focus on those things versus the negative things. And that is something that I very much am trying to do in my own life. So again, gratitude is the word of this episode, is the word of my past week. Find things that you are thankful for and to keep you moving forward. And you can always go to badwolvesnation.com. Go listen to the new single that just came out. Go support the guys. I think the tour is going on for another week or so. And I'm sure there'll be more touring going on. As always, the joke is Doc is one of the busiest people when it comes to touring and doing stuff. So I'm sure he will be doing something in some capacity. Go support him. He is a great human being, one of those awesome people that I've gotten to know through doing this show and can call a friend. And am always appreciative of his time digitally in IRL and all of that kind of stuff. So go support them. If you would like to follow the podcast, you can do such at BrewSpeak on all your social media platforms. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that is a thing. And a huge shout out to Rockabilia, even though maybe they didn't get the best press in this episode, or even for themselves when they dropped the Kanye Burzum shirt. It is a thing where I tremendously love all the people over there. Frankie has become one of the greatest friends I've made through doing this. Listens to me vent and bitch about things almost daily. In addition to just throwing ideas out there, there's some cool news that we're going to work on. I might call him as soon as I'm done doing this and kind of get an idea of what does this look like in actuality. But some things are on the horizon, and I want to thank them once again. Use our code BREWtally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. And I want to thank all of you for listening to this, not only this long episode, intro and outro of me talking. I can already potentially see the YouTube comment. Conversation starts here. Dude, shut the fuck up. No one cares. I got a few of those already on the last episode. And, honestly, also fuck you. You have a fast forward button. I don't charge you to listen to this thing. So it owes you nothing. And if you don't want to listen, you don't have to. But if you are, thank you. Honestly, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you next week with Jordan Buckley. He returns from Better Lovers. That was a fucking great chat. I cannot wait for you all to hear it. Enjoy the rest of your week.